Okay, thanks for coming. We're here for the ADP meeting, Thursday, July 27th, 2 o'clock. First on the menu is Welcome to Squamish Nation, Traditional Territory. And second, adoption of agenda that the July 27th agenda, as we see here, is adopted. Motion to adopt, Sarah, seconded, Chris. Okay, let's get to the minutes. July 13th, our last ADP meeting. Has anyone looked at that? Does it look good, or is there errors, omissions?
I wasn't there for it, so.
I had a quick read, it looked good to me.
Yeah, I didn't notice anything.
Yeah.
Oh.
Motion to adopt the minutes, seconded by Derek. Yeah, sorry. Yep. Business. Start with the development permit 465 at 38921 Queensway. And we have
Staff has a presentation.
staff has a presentation.
sorry.
Perfect.
Yeah, and
Okay.
then we'll speak with the applicants afterwards.
Okay, they're here.
They're here, yes.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Great. Thanks.
So good afternoon, ADP. My name is Fletcher, planner with the District of Squamish, and I'm here to present development permit 465 for 38921 Queensway. This application, if approved, would permit a 121 square meter addition to an existing industrial building. Proposal complies with the I-1 zone and no variances are requested. The lot is located in the Sea to Sky Business Park, and it's located in DPA 6, the Squamish Industrial Park and BC Rail Industrial Development Permit area. This is the site plan. Addition is to the northeast corner of the building fronting Queensway. The site is disturbed, it's covered in asphalt, and it's surrounded by a chain link fence that they'll be retaining. Site has two accesses, but the existing access is off of Queensway and that will remain. And parking is compliant with the zoning. This is the south elevation, and that's in the plans you have in front of you. Just to show you what the existing building looks like, the addition will be on to the photo on the right, and that's fronting Queensway. And this is the existing landscaping as it stands right now, so they'll be cleaning that up. And this landscaping in the front where the boulders are were part of a previous DP to approve something comparable to this that was never built. The landscaping plan proposes, again, to clean up the existing landscaping on site, and staff feel that it sufficiently meets guidelines. DPA 6 is established to regulate the form and character of industrial development in the Squamish Business Park. The overall objectives are to provide guidance to the physical development of the major area and to accommodate industrial growth with minimal impact on nearby environmental areas and to ensure aesthetically attractive industrial development. So staff feel that the application sufficiently meets DPA guidelines, but are looking for ADP's comments and recommendations regarding the form and character of the proposed development, including site plan, architectural design, building material, exterior finish, and landscape plan. Thanks, Jesse.
Okay. Thanks, Jesse.
Come
The
on
applicant
up.
want to
Yeah.
come up and make their presentation? Right.
Some sample boards for the form and character finishes of the building, which are rendered there. I'm the builder, Steve's the owner, and we just wanted to give a good illustration that it's a significant improvement of what the existing building is in place, fronting onto Queensway with update to material colors from a white clad metal building to black with an architectural feature siding in cedar and a flat panel system on the architectural feature here. Also a new entrance, and as you can see, significant street front frontage upgrade to what's there currently, along with the landscape plan, which is quite well rendered by a local landscaper, Chris here as well, to answer questions in the notes. So I don't know if you'd like me to pass that around, if you can see it flying on the table. Or...
You can just pass the material palette,
Sure.
I guess. And your name was?
Kevin Raffler.
Kevin. Okay.
So again, clear natural siding, which is rendered in the PowerPoint that you have on the list.
Yeah.
Overview. We're going to do a flat metal panel system, but in black. This just illustrates the strong core here. So it'll be black clad building.
Horizontal line?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. Kevin, and you're the owner?
I'm Steve, yeah. The owner.
Steve?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thanks. Okay, and you said landscape architect?
Yeah.
You want to explain some of the landscape architecture?
Have you got any questions in regards? I think one of the big issues was the parking blockage or any chain link fencing, I think. I think it's part of Squamish's bylaws is to protect or to screen, thank you, parking areas within. So, no, thanks, Mark. So initially we were hoping to actually utilize a lot of the plant material that was already on site. A lot of it's very mature, and I think we could do a lot of screening with it. But I think over the years it's gone down a little bit too far, and it's deteriorated. So in order to incorporate some of the material, which we probably could, which I think I outlined in there, we'll be able to utilize in some of these smaller areas up and around by the parking. So right now we have an existing dogwood hedge that is already there, which can be maintained and actually revitalized to come back in, which is part of the original plan. And then just add in where we have some missing right now up on this top, where are we? Southeast or southwest corner. This area in here, we already have a light standard in this area, so an electrical crossing underneath the paving. So trying to get anything substantial in this corner is not going to actually work. And I think for obstructing views or just for traffic safety coming in and out, I think it's best to leave this down. We can utilize some small river rock, maybe a couple of small fescues in this area as well too. So coming back into here, I think this is the bulk right here, either doing the cedars, which is quite efficient right in through here, leave them at about just enough to cover the chain link fence that is already existing right now, to block this parking area right here. This is an open-ish. Want to be able to highlight a lot of, you know, the height and the signage for this top area and through here. So your visual coming in, you're still going to be able to see this and a little bit of his displayed area in through that area, but a majority of it will be blocked. Species coming into this front area in here are, what have we got? We've got a lot of miscanthus, very tall grasses. Oh,
on the screen.
look at you.
Show it on the board.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Oh, how do you do that?
So we'll come into
Yeah.
Is that okay with the
Do you want me to use this? I don't know how to do it.
Yeah,
You just press the red button.
The red button?
Yeah, it looks like a flash.
Oh, look at that. Okay. So up here we have cedar hedges coming down to block, sufficient block actually the parking area in there, which would encompass this area, and also visually this way up into here, and visually that way. So I think a majority of the blockage is good right through here, and then picking up, oh, there you go, yeah. Picking up a lot of taller grasses, some of the euonymus, which is a taller shrub as well too. Yeah, just to be able to block that area. It's going to look nice. A lot of river rock, low maintenance kind of a look with some boulders, accents and driftwood pieces.
Great. Okay. Anything else? Okay, let's do a round of questions and then we'll go to our comments after that. Sarah, do you want to start with questions?
Sure. Is it along the plan north, along the chain fence on the other side of the building? Is it paved all the way to the edge?
On the,
So along this length of the building?
Is it paved? No, it's all gravel at this point right now.
Okay.
And the lot right next to it is,
Storage area
I don't know what it is. Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, you're right.
Storage
Yeah,
yard.
it's a storage yard.
with the chain link fence,
Yeah.
fence down the perimeter.
That's right here.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's my question. Oh, sorry, excuse me, I take that back. And it's just, is the sidewalks at grade with the existing parking that's in the new?
In this area right in through here? I think it's right, yeah, it's.
It is at grade.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the site plan, so it's
Mhm.
accessibility at greater.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah.
Is this a part 3 or a part 9 building, or is it 2 part 9 buildings?
It's a single Part 9 building, still, even with the addition, still under 600 square meters.
And the footprint? Yeah.
Sorry?
The footprint?
Footprint.
Yeah.
Building area.
And then the other question that I had, are you guys making any provision with that black siding to prevent it from overheating?
Is it an issue? I don't know.
Do you have some?
There's an ventilation in the building assembly itself.
Yeah, maybe something extra in the rain screen, or making the rain screen like.
There is no rain screen to the building. It's just an actual steel structure, so it is breathing, and it's not a spray foam insulation, so it's just bad insulation on the interior.
I think you'll find the structure on the front is in fact sitting proud of the building itself. So there's a substantial cavity, if you look at the dimension between that and the actual skin of the building itself. So there's really no call for heat transfer from the outside into the inside, because it's quite it's a major cavity.
Does this comply with, are you guys following ASHRAE or the other standard for the construction?
I don't know, we haven't.
We will have to bring an architect
Yeah,
on for our BP set. We haven't detailed that yet.
Okay, that's all my questions.
I have any questions?
Okay. Okay. I have a couple questions. I see a future second building.
The
That's
site is zoned
potential-
for 2 buildings, and that's just historically what's been on the footprint.
Okay, yeah. And if you were to build that, do you have enough parking to suit the existing or the proposed and the future?
I believe right now, Doug, you might be able to answer a little
No,
better
the
than me.
parking is calculated now is for the one building.
For the one building?
Certainly, if you had another building there, then you would add additional parking as required, where required, as part of
Okay.
the design and planning process. Yeah. But it's just an area that's allocated for a future possibility of another building.
Yeah. And there's existing gates on Resolution Way and Queensway,
Correct.
and they're both locked at night type thing for
Correct.
security? Okay. And do you have any landscape plans along Resolution Way there? It's a dead-end road, right?
Yeah, it's a dead-end road,
Yeah, there's nothing planned on that frontage or the end there?
I haven't really planned any improvements in that area. It's all considered existing, so we haven't really looked at that aspect of the
Yeah, I
site.
think the existing landscape, I think it's still irrigated back there as well, but it links up to BCT fencing, I think. And yeah, it's kind of a no kind of zone
Yeah.
thing going on there between the two, so it's, yeah.
Low visibility there,
Yeah.
for sure. Do you have irrigation for this proposed planting?
There's irrigation in there right now,
Oh, there is.
and we can definitely upgrade to accommodate some of the new plantings, that's not a problem.
Okay. And that's all my questions. Chris?
What's the panel width of the reverse seam? Is it what you've shown? It's different than what's on the elevations, it looks like.
This is just a sample of profile. Yeah, we're following the elevations, and as I said, we still have to detail that in our BP set.
So do you know how big that panel is going to be? It looks like it's big, like 3 feet.
I think they are, I think they're 3 by width, is 3, and then I think it's a max of 2 foot in elevation.
And what's the finish? Semi-transparent natural cedars. do you know the spec on that clear?
We're just
Finish?
going with, we've proposed 1x6 clear cedar,
But the finish?
just clear natural, natural transparent cedar
Okay.
finish.
And this one garage door, is that the only one remaining natural anodized aluminum? Everything else you're basically painting out black?
That's gonna be black as well.
That
That's
one
black
is?
as well, yeah.
So everything will be painted out the same color, there's no leftover?
Yeah.
Okay, questions?
My other question, with the signage here as it exists on here, does that comply with all the current signage guidelines?
No, but they can apply for a comprehensive sign plan, which they've proposed, and then that would get wrapped in with the development permit and various sign bylaw.
That's all my questions.
Okay. What's the operation or the hours in the building?
9 to 6, Tuesday to Saturday.
Okay. And the signage, is it intended, because they're backlit, would they be on at night or?
That's how we had it at our own store.
Yeah.
That's how I plan to have them
Right.
in the future.
Okay. The other thing, you've got a display area at the front, so because you don't have a door on that face, is the intention to bring small things out front there, or are you bringing like sleds? Or what's?
Yeah, it's more for like, just, well, no, it's gonna be like equipment, like, sleds and dirt bikes and stuff out front, but it's not intended for people to actually walk up and
Oh,
look at.
okay.
It's more just for, when people curb appeal kind of
Right.
idea.
Okay. Yeah, because you only have that 5 foot width.
Yeah, it's not for people to,
Gotcha. Okay. And I guess the other one was just noticing that it's an existing structure being renovated, but it won't be sprinkled. And you're putting the mezzanine in, so I guess, we'll review that once you get closer to the building permits. So, yeah. Okay. That's all the questions.
Okay. Now we move on to comments. Sarah, do you want to follow up with comments?
Sure. I'm just trying to envision this, because I didn't have a really good look. I looked more at the building as opposed to the lot next door, of, whether or not it would make any difference to have anything along any plantings along the back of the building. But if it backs onto another lot, then it might be pointless.
Yeah, we have an electrical, underground electrical along that whole side as well too.
Um,
So trying to, and it's not really that wide back there, so as far as an emergency or a flow through, to have that around the building would probably be a lot better. To have it open and, with a lot next door, I don't know.
yeah. We might want to put it up.
Yeah.
That's it, I don't have any.
Okay. Derek?
Really like what you guys are doing here with the colors and the little bit of wood. I think it will really stand out. And I think the yellow that comes with the siding with the product that you're selling, I think it all works really well.
Much of that is dictated by the actual supplier back east.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a corporate wall with their color scheme, they highly
Yeah.
encouraged it, so we follow them quite closely.
It looks like it's really well thought through in terms of the planting. I would give consideration to just the quantity of plants. It seems that the spacing is quite loose and there'd be an opportunity to fit some more shrubs in there. So I would just take a look at the spacing and see if you could fit more numbers in there, just to give it a fuller look from day one, but otherwise good.
Okay. Traffic circulation looks good. I mean, it's perfect straight through site, so that's fantastic. You might want to consider your sign height, because you've got that one tree in the front. It looked quite low, which is awesome, but that tree might be a consideration for a sight line there. Now, I didn't see it in the photo, but there is sidewalk on that side?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and there was the DP previously didn't do any of the work in front.
Oh, they did, so they put down the sidewalk and they did
Yeah.
all that planting out front.
Okay.
Because it's a long story, but they did the sidewalk, so and it's up to District of Squamish standards.
Right. Okay, yeah, besides consideration of that height of sign, that's all I have for comments.
Yeah, I support the project. I think it's great. The only thing I'd caution you on, which I think we say a lot on projects, is natural clear stain cedar is just a challenge maintenance-wise. I like it under protection, but where you're going to get water splashing around the base is going to get trashed pretty good. We're starting to see some of the faux, like the metal panels, which would probably suit your building and zero maintenance. So normally I love wood, but you just see it around town. If it's maintained, great, and you're willing to choose the right clear finish, I think it's fine, but yeah, it's going to get hammered pretty good. So just be sure that's the one feature of your building kind of, so hopefully it gets kept up, or I'd say go to something else.
I was gonna say what Chris just said too. Yeah, because it is such a stunning feature against the black too. I think it would be a shame if like 2 years down the road, it started to look very worn and faded. It can really impact the entire look of the building. But I love the idea of reconditioning, doing this addition to the existing structure there that really modernizes it and updates it too. So that's great. Love the colors and materials. And also the placement, I understand that's a consideration, but looking at that, it looks like where that tower is with the signage on it is actually like when you're driving down the road, it is actually a really good opening from either direction to see it. And I really like that you guys have placed it lower, like on both the south side and on that east side too. I think it just looks more quality and not trying to like get your signage up as high as you can see it from 5 miles away. So, yeah, that looks good.
It's more of a question. I didn't ask the exterior pavement area. What products that was? Is it just concrete or?
It's asphalt.
Oh, as you walk into the building.
Oh, there's a concrete landing and entryway around the perimeter of the front of the building and the entry at grade.
Right, slab on grade. Okay. Yep. Otherwise, I didn't really have any comments. It looks good. Good update to an existing building.
Okay, our comments, so,
I have one more comment.
yep,
A building that is an F2 occupancy that is more than 470 square meters in gross floor area must be designed by an architect. You guys have a designer, there's no architect.
We're bringing on the architect now for BP design.
Yeah, so it doesn't say for the BP, for the design. So you run a risk that there might be changes required to this that might force you back to development permit. And planning should have flagged this before. Okay.
Good catch.
I have one follow-up question or comment. If there's an ability to capture some of that rain off the roof, it's just a metal roof. You could get that to the landscape. You have quite a bit. I know it's irrigated,
Rain gardens?
but no, not rain. Just capture it,
Yeah.
barrel or whatever, and discharge. And I think that's it. So we just go into voting for our recommendations. We have 4 of them. One is ADP supports the project as presented, does not need to see the project return for further review. B, ADP supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. Do you want us to?
If you decide to go with that, then we can.
Okay, sure.
Can I make a motion
Yeah.
for A?
Hey, all right.
Second that.
Let's vote. Who agrees with A? Opposed?
Can I vote?
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. That is it. We have adopted A. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you for
Good
the
job.
opportunity to present.
Thank you.
All right, we're here for development permit 456 at 1117 Industrial Way, 38930 Queensway. Jesse Fletcher can introduce the project from the district.
Yeah, absolutely. So good afternoon, ADP. I am Jesse Fletcher, planner with the District of Squamish. I'm here to present development permit application 456 for an addition to an existing industrial building located at the south end of the Sea to Sky Business Park on the corner of Queensway and Industrial Way. It's a 368 square meter addition to an existing industrial building. The addition would expand the operations of the existing Cal Tire vehicle servicing and auto-oriented retail business, which is a permitted use in the light industrial I-1 zone. The proposed development is located in development permit area 6, Squamish Industrial Park and BC Rail Industrial, and is subject to the applicable development permit area guidelines, which are attached to your staff report. Staff are generally supportive of the site plan and specifically request ADP recommendations on building form and landscape as it pertains to DPA 6 guidelines. Currently, the proposed project has no variances, though some things do not currently meet guidelines. We're working with the applicant to make sure that they do, or the zoning bylaws, sorry. The applicant will need to consolidate the 2 lots prior to issuance of the development permit. Staff note some areas where they are not fully meeting DPA 6 guidelines. Building form states that the siding, massing, shape, pattern, roof line, and exterior finish of the building should be sufficiently varied to avoid a monotonous landscape. Staff feel that overall the building complies, however are seeking ADP's recommendations to ensure that the east face of the building complies with DPA guidelines. And then the second area is landscaping. DPA 6 states that landscaping should be provided to screen necessary features and enhance the appearance of buildings. DPA 6 also states that areas not used for building, storage, or parking must be landscapes. Landscape staff comments are as follows. Staff suggests that the juniper planting material is at a low height to screen the parking as required by the zoning bylaw. Staff are recommending Yugo pine or a similar evergreen as a replacement. Staff request ADP comments regarding the proposed dowd beech trees and whether a wider crown tree might be more appropriate for the location. Staff note that 2 additional trees, one in each of the parking islands, will be required to comply with the zoning bylaw parking landscape regulations. And staff are requesting ADP comments as to whether the proposed amount of landscaping on site is sufficient to enhance the appearance of the site, or if additional landscape should be provided on site. And so I'll pass it over to the applicants. Maybe just close the mouse to hover over.
Oh, I see. I also have one of these high-tech things.
If you want to use that in conjunction with the mouse, then we can record it on the screen. So also hover with the mouse.
Okay, yep.
Okay, when you're ready, introduce yourselves and carry on.
Hello, everybody. My name is Larry Podhora. I'm an architect on the project. Speak a little about the form and character.
Jessica Thiessen, I'm representing the landscape architect.
I'm David Penner. I'm with Cal Tire, and we have a real estate and construction group that I'm a part of.
Derek Dranfield, I'm the location manager for Squamish Cal Tire.
Great. So I suppose it has to be said that this is an addition to this portion of. Can you see? Oh, there it is. Yeah. Can everybody see the cursor on there? Whoops. How do I back up? Doesn't seem to show the cursor, so I'll just use that. So this is the original building.
If you don't use the cursor, then
Oh, yeah.
people watching at
Notice
home,
you.
people at home can't see it,
Oh, there it is,
so.
it's right up there.
Yeah. There's an imaginary screen on one side, so yeah, we'll try to keep you on
Okay,
track.
all right. This is very complicated stuff. So this is a modest industrial building that follows corporate standards in terms of material, colors, and so on, and signage. This is the original building, which is being modified with some demolition on 2 levels inside, and this is the addition. The sizes and parameters are listed in your handouts. The total area is approximately 10,000 square feet. The ingress and egress from Queensway is happening in this location, and there is no access from Industrial Way, this being a very short frontage in any case. It is a corner site, and so the preponderance of our landscaping and soft treatments happens at the corner, and Jessica will speak to that a little later. This is a tire storage facility which is screened by a landscape strip and a significant fence to the neighboring property, both to the south and the east. There's a vehicle access into the facility via overhead doors, as you can see on the east elevation in your handouts, and we'll have a look at that in a moment. So that is the site plan. Here's the plan of the existing building, showing some demolition on 2 levels, as I mentioned earlier. And here is the addition, indicating the overhead doors, shop floor, and some of the internal layout. You'll notice that these drawings are very well developed. Again, it goes back to the corporate standards and functional requirements. So a great deal about this is known already, so we're basically reusing drawings that are much more technical than we normally would bring to the advisory design panel. So I ask you to please bear with us and sort of try to pick out the information as best as you can, and I'll help you out too. This is the 2nd level, which is accessible by 2 protected exit stairs, and there's also some openings that the tires can go both up and down through. And a roof plan showing the sloping roof. This is conventional steel with a sloping internal sloping beams, pre-engineered beams. This is just equipment layout and furniture. So you can see that this has already been laid out to some considerable level of detail. The elevations, again, very basic, utilizing primarily profiled metal, and broad samples of the actual colors that are being proposed. The orange is a corporate color, and these 2 are used as corporate background for that accent as well. Sections, probably not material to our discussion. And just talk about the landscape a little bit.
Yeah, we've provided some screening of the parking lot along the exterior lot line. We have, as recommended, we have changed the junipers to maple pine. And we've added some trees in the islands, or in the island and in the corner portion, to better meet the requirements. And we've also have some landscaping screening the storage compound on the south end.
Do you guys want to talk a little bit about the nature of your business and how the public accesses it, and anything you have to add to why the building is designed the way it is?
Sure. Currently, there's a single bay, servicing bay in the building, and 3 hoists that are located external to the building. So the intent of this is to just update the facility and provide proper bays so that the majority of the work is taking place on the interior of the building. And along with that, we're upgrading the lot. So now there's no asphalt on the property, and so it will be, I guess the majority of the lot will have asphalt, and we're doing some off-site improvements to add a turning lane and sidewalk. Currently, there's multiple accesses along Queensway. That's all being consolidated into the one access on the south side, and I guess the landscaping will be defining those entrances as they currently are.
No, I guess a bit of the background behind the building, it was a commercial thought process when the Cal opened up in 2001, and the need for businesses in the retail aspect has just grown immensely. Our guys are doing work in the rain and snow and every which weather, so it's not conducive to a proper image and standard to what you'd expect if people have their own personal vehicle at times. So it's an overall great improvement to facilities for our clientele to hopefully visit and be able to do business locally with us.
Okay, that concludes that portion. We'll move on to questions from the panel here. Dean, do you want to start with questions?
Sure. The first thing was just this reconfigured fence storage compound. So what's the material of the fence?
It's concrete, 8-foot high, right?
Yeah, so the material along the property line is a concrete block, and the remaining portion, the interior portion, is a chain link fence with privacy slats.
And the concrete block, is that existing?
No.
Okay, so it's all new. And then the chain link, or both the chain link and the concrete block, what's the height?
8 feet is our typical.
And it has a roof, or is it just a...
No,
okay.
it's open air.
And it's storage of anything in particular?
Tires.
Sorry?
Tires.
Tires. Oh, right. Tire storage.
It says 10-foot height on plans here, the concrete block.
Yeah, so the concrete block is a requirement from the fire department, I believe, and so I'm guessing that's...
I thought it was 8 feet, but we can confirm that. The last, my information was that they required 8 feet, but we'll have to confirm.
Okay. The other thing is it a firewall between the two building forms? You've got the sort of more administration or entrance, and then you've got all the bays.
Is it 2 separate buildings or
Yeah.
1 building? It'll be classified as 1 building because we have a lot of interpenetration between the 2.
Okay, it's not a firewall between the two.
It's not a firewall.
No. Is it a sprinkled building as well?
Yes.
Sorry, it isn't.
Oh, it isn't?
No.
I apologize, sorry.
So the tire counts that don't require this size of building, this amount of tire storage to this.
Right, so is this a F1?
F2.
Oh, it's F2. Oh, right, okay. And I guess my other question was just more about whether there was consideration to try and manipulate the car parking, or at least try and integrate a bit more landscaping into the car parking. Like I see a lot of, on the street side, you've got a fairly long row of car parks broken up once, and then when you go closer to the building where the loading dock is,
sort of awkward little cluster of car parks. It seems like there's a few awkward little clusters of car parks that are just placed as needed to try and hit. I don't know if this is a zoning car parking requirement or is it a climate zoning? Okay. So just the question was really, was there consideration to try and add some more landscaping around the front of the building at least, and certain areas around the car park to try and break up the, I don't know, is it asphalt?
Well, we are trying to soften that entire edge, but you're right, there may be an opportunity to grab a few square feet of area and turn it into landscape, particularly maybe on the left-hand side of the exit.
Oh, right, down there, because that's just, that was all my questions. Thanks.
Shan?
So the 15-foot rear setback that's behind the building to the property line, is that just intended to stay like fire lane? Like that's not used for anything else? Like, or are the public going to have access to driving around it?
So commercial vehicles are serviced on that east side of the building, so that's where our primarily our commercial vehicles go.
Okay.
Typically, we want to keep our retail customers and our light cars and trucks on the other side.
Okay. So the idea would be they would be northbound on Queensway, would turn right into the facility, proceed around the back of the building, and then exit at the north end on Industrial Way. Okay.
Correct. The current mall right now, they're coming in multiple. So
I've been in there.
Yeah. So that's the, is it Discovery, the street before that? If they're coming off the highway, they'd come down Discovery, around, and then up to up Queensway into our facility, and then leave on Industrial, get back to the highway.
Okay, and then further to that, the exit only that is on to Industrial Way, it seems quite wide, like given that it's 40 feet, which I get it if you've got large commercial vehicles going through there, but is the intent that there's just going to be like no entry signage there, or is there actually like you're going to be sort of like the landscaping directed that really you can't turn into there?
At the present moment, there wasn't going to be signage, and you were going to be able to turn in there.
Oh, okay.
If required.
Okay, no, I just saw that before that it looked like it was just an exit only. There's a
We are only showing arrows going out, so if that is something we want to turn into both directions, then we should probably.
yeah, on E1 it actually shows it too, that that's exit only onto Industrial Way.
Yeah, there was a change in the middle of the in the DP, so I think the background on the electrical is the old one, whereas on the site plan A2.1, the arrows there just on the north side of the building are showing that vehicles can.
Yeah, that's what confused me because I saw those arrows going both directions, but then it said exit only, so where is that traffic coming from that would be going in that way? So, okay, that makes sense. I could just see with an opening that wide that people are going to use it like that.
Yeah, the width of that would be required just for, like you said, the commercial vehicles, so they can swing out accordingly, be safe, and not ideally going over both lanes of traffic.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Maybe a question for planning, but that CMU screen on the property line, is that considered building or a fence? Like that's definitely over fence height allowances on the property line? And then are there setback requirements? How are they allowed to have that high of a structure right on the property line?
On which property line, sorry?
On the bottom, what is that, the
southeast
corner?
So that's a fire requirement
Mhm.
because they are adjacent to the Florida Muster site, so that requires a variance then that is specifically requested by fire to provide a bit of a firewall between what's happening to the south of them and the tire storage.
So is that specifically because because of the Fortis muster station there, or is that?
Specifically because
Not because of the tire storage.
both
Cool.
combination.
We might consider it potentially as a retaining type wall thing that would just need like engineering approval. If it's 10, like 8
Yeah,
or
to me,
10
it's more of
feet
a built
like,
structure. So then
concrete.
I
Yeah,
would think
I'm
it would have
assuming
to
that-
comply to the setbacks,
Yeah.
not
possibly.
right on the property line.
We do have different setback allowances for retaining wall
Mm.
type things, so,
Okay.
yeah, but Jesse, you should look into that.
And then on the south elevation on the second floor, is that double command door for firefighting access really there? Or is that?
That is
On the upper floor?
Yeah.
forklift access.
Yeah, that provides forklift access to get product up to that second floor.
And it's a French swing door like that?
At the moment, yes.
That's it for questions.
Okay. You have, looks like quite a bit of road widening and a right turn bay off Queensway. Is that a district requirement to create that slip lane now?
Yes.
Okay. So the traffic will be crossing that bike lane throughout that whole length there. And then you've got a new sidewalk planned, and the sidewalk butts up right against the property line. Is that right? And then you get to the landscaping?
Yes.
Okay. So do you have requirement for lighting along here? There's probably lighting along there now?
Yeah.
Where are you gonna fit the lighting?
I
guess?
don't think there's lighting along there now. We've been working directly with engineering on that and satisfying the requirements. I'm not sure that we need to provide lighting on that side.
Okay, I see a new lamp on the south, existing power pole, there's a light on there, and then there's looks like a light symbol kind of midway. So just maybe clarify that.
Sure.
With engineering.
There's also a building mounted lighting which is going to contribute something to the life safety and to personal safety on the
Right.
sidewalk.
Okay.
So it's just some power poles
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, you have quite a bit of off-site works to do, eh?
Yes. And it's above a high-powered gas main, so it'll be exciting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's good. And I assume 12-meter driveway width is allowable?
I believe so.
Yeah, okay, on both sides, okay. Cool. Have you considered the sight line if you're exiting out onto Industrial Way? It's now a slip lane, I call it, where your speeds are a little bit more increased around that corner, and then you've got a big truck coming out going left there. Has that been considered?
Yes, again, we were working with engineering on that because it's a T intersection and just the type of turning movement, they felt that was acceptable.
Okay, okay. On the page A 2.1, there's a scope of work definition in there, in a box. And just need clarification, it says renovation of existing Cal Tire building and addition of pre-engineered building to include new service bays and tire storage. And what's confusing is the second paragraph there. Cal Tire to provide fence, compound, and entry sidewalk. Others to provide all other site work, civil, landscape, utility connections, and building. Is that?
That's probably a bit of an error. All of that is going to be part of the project.
Right.
From the district's point of view, Cal Tire is providing it all.
Okay, it's not a scope or a phase thing. Okay, got it.
The construction will be phased, but from your point of view, it's all one project, and at the end, we're going to get what you see on it.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any green initiatives about? I mean, it's a gravel parking lot now and a metal building. You're paving essentially the whole thing. Do you have any green initiatives or rain gardens or rain capture?
Not at the moment. We have a stormwater detention tank, but not a rain garden or anything like that.
Are you planning on putting a pump in that tank for irrigation, or is it just to hold the?
We aren't. We've had some, I guess, some bad experience trying to do that, where at the end of the day we end up with pumps that are silted up and don't function and require a lot of maintenance, and so we haven't looked at that. The other, I guess, problem with this site is it is a low site, so it's hard to get the grades required and the drainage to have a rain garden, just because we're dealing with existing grades which are below the FCL.
Yeah. Okay. That's all my questions. Jenna?
No questions for me.
Garrett?
Question is, was any consideration to the rainwater coming off in front of the front entry there, with maybe just throwing in a gutter to prevent a lot of water dropping off right there in front of the front door and backsplashing against the building and on people? Should be a fairly easy solution.
It should be an easy solution, and yeah, we will absolutely consider it.
My other question is, why does the orange stripe in the back not cover the back part of the big building?
This was one of the comments that came from planning, and yes, we would intend to join up this stripe.
And one more question for Cal Shire. Your design guidelines does not require the new addition to have a green roof? Planting on it? No? Not yet?
Not yet.
Thank you.
Can you just explain to me how pedestrians are to access the sidewalk? So they go through the driveway?
Actually, yeah, that's
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's,
point, but
I guess
we're
the
not
point is
joining
there's no
the
connection
landscape.
through the landscape.
That is a good point, it's an error. We'll make sure that our pedestrian way connects to the sidewalk.
Yeah, to that
Yeah.
egress pass and then accessible spot. Okay, that's all the questions.
I have one more question about that north entrance again as well. Is the intention to be that it would be the exit would be a right-hand turn only? Because I would strongly recommend that would be the case there, because trying to get large trucks trying to turn, like that's a really busy intersection already. Large trucks trying to get out of there and swing around and make a right-hand turn could bottleneck up that whole area. And if they need to go that way, then they could always loop around the block again, like you said, for the access.
So you mean trucks leaving the site turning left? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think it should be a right, they should only be able to turn right there because it's very close to that intersection, and there ends up often being like a backup of cars in the left-hand turning lane turning south onto Queensway there.
I'm assuming that engineering would probably look at that too, and we wouldn't want somebody turning left off of industrial into the site, like waiting in that turn lane, blocking that turn lane, right? So I'm assuming that engineering would want that.
Would catch that, okay.
So you almost need like a physical separation to not allow that, or people will in the left, premature left-hand turn lane.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a huge improvement, like right now.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I
You
get
guys
that.
have been there on industrial, it's wide.
You're like, where do I even go in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just always a backup turning left onto Queens. It's just really hard to get out there because people are going way faster, and there's going to be more and more traffic. So I think to avoid that and keep looping would be better for you guys too, I'm sure.
I think the challenge to kind of separate that to prevent someone from turning in is that you have commercial trucks pulling out, which is a much wider. So to make it so that a commercial truck can pull out, it probably automatically means a car can pull out.
But at least signage is going to deter people from doing it. May not stop them entirely, but
Or put in the those teeth that rip up your car.
More business for
Good
you.
business.
Okay.
Okay. Dean?
So, if I understand correctly, the far north is purely an exit, right? Is that correct?
No.
Oh, it's not?
No, it's a right in and right out.
Oh, it is? Oh, so people can drive. Okay. Well, my comment was going to be if it was an exit only, then I thought there might have been a missed opportunity with the entrance where you've got the showroom sort of slightly south and it's a double height void space. If that was flipped, so it's on the north, essentially the north-west corner, you could sort of take advantage of that double exposure, double height space, run canopy around the corner. And because if that was only one way, you could bring the pavement out, you know, sort of dress up. Like, because I guess my issue with this in general is just, it's a big building, how do you break it up? It's pretty simple. And at least like it kind of comes back to where the canopy is located for me, and it's only a small section, and preferably it would extend a little bit further, maybe to break that up. You know, it would be nice to see if we could somehow turn the corner, but I guess in a two way they don't have the space to do that.
But it does have the window and the signage on the roof.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
So at least there's something, it's not just like looking at a,
Yeah, so I was kind of like hoping that was one way there, you could bring that all the way around, and it would just sort of give it some, maybe a stronger presence and just a bit more life to the building, rather than just, at the moment, it just reads as the car servicing aspect, which is just quite a big, simple.
Yeah, one of the dynamics too with the door being there, I imagine, is where our counters are located, there's a window right into our shop. We want our customers to see what we're doing to the vehicle, so that's all kind of incorporated. And at the same time, the lounge area that's going to be there, the amenities inside the showroom is going to be greatly improved what's currently there. So.
Gotcha. Okay. My second comment was just about the pavement area in general. Like, it's really the entire property is asphalt with a building on it, right? So I would like to see somehow some more landscaping incorporated. And, you know, whether it's like simple things like we talked about car park at 16 at the entry there, whether you're able to get something connecting back to that car space as like a triangle.
Sorry, which side of the building?
This is the very bottom left as you drive in off the left-hand
here.
side. Yeah, there's car space 16, is that one there?
Yeah, we talked about that, and I think there's a possibility of doing something there.
Yeah, and same again, like the car park 17, which is directly across from it. It's like the two spaces that back onto a little 3-pack where the loading dock is. Like, again, if there's a way to like give 17 like a finish, like, you know, with some landscaping there, just to sort of like terminate it properly rather than just like lines on pavement.
I can get first glance and look at it, it's a big block.
Yeah.
Asphalt, but obviously the room for commercial vehicles, it's got to be incorporated in there.
And I feel like you've got a bit of space there. You might be able to,
Currently it's labeled as bicycle storage, so it'll have to be a fairly limited amount of landscaping, but I think it is possible to do something there.
We're talking about adding something up here.
Oh, on that side, sorry, we're talking about
sort of
right here?
the southwest corner.
Yep. Sort of like in that zone there.
Right, okay, I understand. No, I thought you were talking about this little corner here, but you're talking about here.
Yeah. And I guess my final comment was just if the building was flipped the other way and you had all the loading bays on the north end and the showroom on the south, would that not actually work better for you? Is it the reason it's the way it is because you're trying to keep it part of the
I
existing
think
building?
you lose that, what you were just talking about, the two focal points in that corner. That's what you want people to see.
High visibility.
Yeah, everyone's coming from those three directions.
Okay.
I'd rather have, the loading on the other end would make more sense.
And we're trying to save as much of the existing structure as possible.
Okay. Yeah, that's all my comments.
Okay. Is that all our comments then? Everyone? You started Dean, sorry Shan, carry on.
No, I think that was
For
all my
comments.
questions. Oh, comments?
Comments, yeah.
No, I don't think I have any more comments. I'll come back to it. Yeah, there we go.
I'd say the only comment for me from kind of form character would be I'd encourage you to think of something other than the orange bollards around the showroom end. If you need them there for not backing into the corners, maybe they could be screened a bit by like a plant or a landscape or something. So it's, I mean, I think it'd be nicer for your customers and probably would help appease some of the comments about squeezing a little more landscape in there. Yeah, just something to not make it look. I know it's a bit tight there on that corner.
Planters or something?
Sorry?
Planters or?
Yeah, like steel planters would be nice, grasses, something low maintenance, but at least would help, I think, demarcate the kind of pedestrian end of the building from the rougher, more vehicle oriented. And then I think it's fine if the rest of the building is utilitarian and you do what you do, but it's just a lot of bollards tight to the building and they're bright orange. So if there's another solution, I think it'd be good for the brand, hopefully, and for the pedestrians.
Part of, so there's two things. One is to prevent people from running into the building, and it's also a bit of a security thing. And that's, so we put them in front, but in the past we've tried things with planters and so
Yeah, I mean, I think they could stay if they have to for those reasons, but even like welded steel plate, I mean, you guys in your shop could probably fab those up, plant them, and it'd be a great.
Or we could do a combination or something.
Something.
Break it up.
Actually, further to that too, I think the idea of keeping them the orange like around the loading bays and on the actual functioning sides of the east, south, and the lower portion of the west side, but where you have more of like the retail space, the orange is really kind of bracing. I think it detracts away from it being a welcoming space. So even if those were a different color, even if those became gray, like something that kind of blended in a little bit more, so it still provided the same security, but didn't look quite so alarming, because nobody's.
You don't like our corporate colors?
No, I'm just saying corporate colors, like where you have the loading bays, like all good, the stripe, that's fine, but it just feels a bit, like jail-like almost.
Yes.
Around the retail space. I just minimize the look of them.
And I think the other, it'd be great from, I don't know if there's DP guidelines that would encourage it, but I think some lighting in the landscape would help the new sidewalk from me walking down there at night, going between pubs. It'd just be an added thing to encourage. It doesn't have to be a lot, but just uplighting of the main trees, 5 lights, something, and would give you probably a little more security too. Yeah, and as much as I understand the upgrade of the all asphalt site, I think there could be an effort out front, again, maybe just of the showroom to do a section of that. Maybe it's permeable pavers, maybe it's something that just appeases kind of the more modernized permeable kind of strategies for site paving. And maybe that could be part of the branding, you know, like it's a color or it's a different texture and the rest is black asphalt, fine. But if there's somewhere on that, I don't know what the square footage of the site is, too small for me to see, that has some permeable paving, I think would go a long ways. Yeah, those are my only comments.
Okay. Comment would be, yeah, further to that, just find some green initiatives. Lots of stormwater capture. You have a tank, but they silt up for sure, so there's solutions for that, pre-treatment or whatever, so you can reuse it. You don't have the grades to deal with it in a rain garden situation, but find green initiatives here. Circulation's great, it works well. You've got lots of room in the back of the building. Don't know if you've considered that, if it's required to have that wide, or if you could have some storage along that back east elevation.
Sorry, can you just repeat that?
Yeah, do you have an ability to, in the back of the building, maybe a garage door or something that you can have storage in the back of the
You
building.
talking about the east side, the long side?
The
here?
long side there, yeah. Is it double wide because you'll have a truck parked there and then you need another truck to cross it?
So there can be up to 2 trucks wide along that back area being serviced.
Yeah, and that's required because
Yeah.
you'll have a truck parked there and you'll have service vehicles running through.
Or 2 trucks
2 trucks, okay. Yeah,
that are just parked there.
I see. Okay. So no ability to create space there
I
for
don't think so.
storage. Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, that's all my questions or comments.
In terms of landscape, I appreciate that this is a space that needs a lot of turning radius and a lot of functioning commercial vehicles. I would encourage just one more look over with turning radius requirements and just seeing if there are a few more pockets where additional planting could be put in, or maybe the beds could be slightly widened based on circulation. As an example, the southwest corner, if the parking bays were moved up slightly, would you be able to fit some more planting in there, as well as at the entryway or around the retail building? So it really needs a closer study, but if it's possible, that would be great. Also, if there's an ability to fit some more trees and some of those islands more within the property, that would be a good thing. Staff had mentioned the species of trees, so I'd encourage to continue that conversation. Getting a nice big tree in there to really have a good presence. And then sort of mentioned, I think it was Chris mentioning an apron of paving in front of the retail building, or retail portion of the building. I think that would be a really nice, almost welcome mat into the building. Maybe it could be permeable paving or such, just to add a bit of interest to that area. But overall, really great. Thank you.
Okay, my comments are, I think this is, I can see that this is very largely driven by the functioning, which leads to the massing, that leads to such a very large amount of hard surface. Because of that, I think the fencing that goes around the tire storage, if that can be made sturdy enough so that you can have some IVs or something like that that grows up there and that's starting to cover that, I think that's a very easy solution to add some greenery without people having to look through the fence into the tires. So that's
But not IVs, it's invasive.
well, that's what I'm thinking. Something like that.
Vine.
Yes.
Yeah. A vine, that's
Vine.
Give me a second language.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, if I look at the roof of the addition of 2,000 square feet or very close to, and understanding that there's no way that we're going to find any area or much area to add any other green area to the site, this really screams to be a green roof. I think it's great for Caltire to take some initiative here and say, let's do something green here, for sure. There's not much else here, which would be a fairly easy addition. And with access from the second story on the existing building, there can even be access to that area. The architecture, for me, feels a little bit like you're going to look at this and it's going to look like it's always been there. So that is neither negative or positive. It's not going to take away from what is there at the moment. So, and then the existing roof really does lend itself to some PV photovoltaics or something like that. That's just ideas for you for making this more environmentally friendly, considering the product that you're dealing with here and the site conditions that is so restrictive with so much hard surface. And yeah, that's my comments. Thank you.
My comments are just to extend the access island to the side accessible parking so that you can get to the sidewalk, and then additionally inside, see, I think the coffee bar is a bar, and you can just have a lower table so that if your users coming in, that's it.
Okay, yeah.
I just wanted to reiterate my comments about the signage at that north access, is that is really considered about not making that intersection worse than it already is. Sarah was talking about, like the sidewalk going all the way out to the sidewalk, or the crosswalk going out to the sidewalk too, would be a good opportunity to have like pavers or concrete or something in there to sort of break it up, like make it visually, like any opportunity there was to actually use a different material, because it's going to be like a huge amount of very hot in the summer asphalt. Like, you know, as of right now, it's gravel, and I've seen the dust storms that get kicked up there driving around it, so I'm sure it will be an improvement, but there's also going to be a massive amount of heat that's generated off of that, so any form of breaking that up would be good. Another question, I just caught this on here, that on A2.1 and E1, there's a discrepancy between that southwest corner. E1 shows 4 parking stalls, like 20 to 23, but then A2.1 only shows like 17, and I can't see what the number is on that one. It only shows 2, which...
A 2.1 is the correct version.
Okay.
E1 is using a dated background that was...
Okay, and that's having to do with like traffic flow and
Yeah.
access and everything. Okay, that makes sense. And any of those sort of dead zones that are in there, like that would be around to differentiate between those parking stalls that are butting into each other, that having some sort of landscape, just curved meridian thing, and in that sort of triangle on the north part of the Queensway access. It'd be nice to see.
And I have one more comment as well. Just with the concrete block, prefer to see like a textured concrete block rather than the standard industrial style.
Like a split face?
Yeah, just to like, you know, it's bordering on someone else's property too, so double-sided with a bit of texture, and I see that you're integrating that into the garbage room. And you know, if there was some thought to like somehow incorporating that into the landscape, or you just terminate it, I don't know, but just something to think about.
Good. That's all the comments there. Going once, twice, 3 times. Okay, so we've got decision to make. We'll run through them. A, ADP supports the project as presented, does not need to see the project returned for further review. B, ADP supports the project as presented, would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. And we'll go over those recommendations if that's it. C, ADP supports the project as presented, would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations and return to the revised project to ADP. Or D, ADP does not support the project as presented for the following reasons. So we need a motion for one of those.
I would like to make a motion for B.
Motion B, ADP supports the project and would like to work with the applicant to resolve the following recommendations.
I would second that.
Second by Shannon and Derek. So, let's have a vote. I guess, or would you like us to summarize those questions before?
Before the vote?
Yes, so what we're gonna do is just, Richard is gonna say a summary, and I want the panel to be in agreement with what's gonna be included in the motion, so that we don't get varying opinions in the motion. If that's possible. Thank you.
Yeah, forgot to summarize. Can you help me out here? I did not summarize.
Okay, we can go through, I can read it.
You can repeat exactly what you said.
Yeah,
Or one.
sorry, I missed that mark. There was, going backwards, a split face block wall on the south property,
Landscape lighting,
landscaped and lighting.
sidewalk delineation and connection to the sidewalk, so across the site. More thought to the signage on the north entry and exit as a right-hand turn.
Green initiatives.
Green initiatives.
Breaking up the asphalt with pavers, concrete, alternative materials.
Yep.
Some sort of treatment to the bollards around the
Bollards.
showroom, possibly landscaping.
Bollards around the shoulder in there.
incorporate some more planning to sort of properly finish off the car spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And that was mostly on the southwest corner?
Yeah.
And did we say connection from the crosswalk or?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Haircut the vine, planting the vines to screen the chain link fence
Vines,
around the tire storage area.
vines are high,
Not IVs.
No,
Not
I-
ivy.
additional planting wherever possible.
additional planting wherever possible.
And I'm not sure planning has a confident stance on that wall, but that's allowable.
Yeah.
I know it's coming from fire, but still, it's a 10-foot wall.
We'll
I'd be
do the
curious.
zoning and get a good idea of where that stands and what we need to do to make that work.
And could there, I don't know where it's at with the Fortis site, but it be required on their side that there's some landscaping put in place in order to minimize the, because if it's Fortis that is requiring this 10-foot concrete wall,
It's our fire that's requiring the 10-foot wall.
okay, but it's due to what is sitting, if it's due to,
No, it's anything on the other side. You have no control over.
no, but what I'm saying though is that they're requiring it because there's going to be like a compression station on that side of it. So if that is a requirement, can it be stipulated that Fortis is required to put landscaping along it to minimize the impact of this 10-foot wall?
I think what they will have to do is they will have to move the concrete wall in, and then for this applicant to do that planting. This is all on this property. We can't do anything on the property next door. Totally irrelevant to, yeah. So this is
They
where
want
I'm,
to put their planting in when they.
Yeah, I don't even know what it looks like right at the moment, so.
It's a yeah, compressor station now.
Yeah.
Can't-
so is the comment maybe that very careful attention should be paid to how this impacts the neighboring property?
It's a good comment. Yep.
And this would be for staff to resolve based on option B, which we won't see again.
Okay, that's a good summary. Did we miss anything? Sorry about that. All right. Let's make a vote for B. All in favor? No opposed? So motion carries. Good job. Thank you.
Thanks.
We're reconvening for a portion of the meeting, downtown zoning changes, public engagement summary and options, presented by Carrie. Perfect.
And
Asia. Okay.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yep, my name is Asia Philp and this is Carrie Hamilton. So we're here today to present the downtown zoning changes. We're kind of cycling back around to you guys. We've gone through a community engagement process, and out of that engagement, we've come up with some option directions to move these downtown zoning changes forward. So we wanted to bring them to you guys. We were supposed to present to council on Tuesday. We got bumped off the agenda, so we're heading to council in September, but we thought it was worthwhile to come to you guys. And even if we get feedback from you, that could lead to some tweaking of the options or whatever before we bring it to council. That would probably be very helpful. So we're just gonna do a quick rundown here of what we heard from the engagement, and then we'll dive into the zoning options. So we've kind of broken it up. We had the two concepts around the employment space was kind of the one topic, and then the building setbacks to provide a wider streetscape to achieve some of the more active transportation things was the other aspect. So that's kind of how the survey was broken down, and so that's how we're going to go through the responses. So the key finding around employment space was that the majority of respondents were in agreement that we should increase the amount of employment space downtown to meet long-term demand, and 80% of people either agreed or strongly agreed that we should increase employment space. We also asked how we can secure the employment space, and about 53% of respondents supported requiring employment space, while 22% supported incentivizing employment space, and about 20% supported just letting the market decide, so not regulating in any fashion. So we then, we drilled down and we asked what options could incentivize employment space. And the vast majority of respondents were not in favor of reducing parking requirements. And this was also backed up by the written comments. We received a ton of written comments from the survey as well. We wanted to point out to ADP that there was about 20% of respondents that either supported reducing parking space requirements, supporting a car share, or a shared parking concept. So there was still community support for exploring these alternatives to traditional parking that could eventually allow us to do future parking reductions if we have viable solutions or alternatives in place, such as improving our transit system, increasing our bicycle infrastructure, potentially a parking garage, increasing enforcement or metering, and car share. These are all options that people are like, don't mess with the parking, but if we have viable alternatives, that they might be open to actually decreasing parking eventually. If that was slightly confusing. So just to quickly summarize the comments, the written comments that we heard and the comments from the workshop that we held, a lot of people spoke to allowing flexibility in the employment space requirements and also allowing for live-work options as an alternative. Also another comment that was frequently heard was that we need better data around what the actual commercial and employment space demand is. And then from you guys, I'm not sure who was at that meeting previously, it was May's ADP meeting, but we heard from you guys that you also stressed that regulations should be flexible. So in terms of how much employment space is provided, where it could be located within a development, and how the space is actually configured, so the layout. And then another key point that we heard was that we should try to preserve the fine grain of the 25 to 50 foot lots that are common downtown, because that provides for that continuous facade of small scale retail that really infuses the vitality into the downtown. Okay, so now I'll pass it along to Carrie.
So the setback section of the survey asks that given limited existing street width, which direction do you most support for the core downtown streets of Pemberton, 2nd and 3rd Avenue? And the majority of respondents were in support of changing building setbacks, but others did not support building setbacks, with 22% preferring to maintain 2 lanes of parking with no trees and narrow sidewalks, while the other 21% supported losing a lane of parking to accommodate a wider sidewalk and street trees. So the survey and workshop then broke down every street into key streetscape elements and asked the community to prioritize the elements for each street. Streetscape elements included wide sidewalks, bike lanes or separated bike lanes, tree and furnishing zones, parking on both sides of the street, and pedestrian cycling safety, curb bulges, and mid-block crossings. Parking on both sides of the street and pedestrian and cycling safety zones, as well as the tree furnishing zone, were the consistent top 3 priorities for each street. And in general, differences between each street were kind of minimal, but there are some key findings, and I'll briefly speak to them right now. So parking on both sides of the street, and the furnishing zone were the highest priority for 2nd Avenue. And you can see the percentages up here compared to all 3 of the streets. And then Pemberton Avenue tied with 3rd on the lowest priority for wide sidewalks, and they also had the lowest priority for parking on both sides of the street. And compared to, and then Pemberton Avenue also had the most support for separated bike lanes, with 47% compared to all of the other streets. So in general, the written survey comments and the in-person feedback that we heard from the May 4th workshop were qualitatively reviewed, and the comments we received generally focused on the discourse between cars and parking and active transportation, with evenly ranged comments supporting both sides. Comments around bike lanes were generally split between strong support for them to them being kind of unnecessary, and there were also comments that 2 streets of bike lanes along 3rd and 2nd were kind of excessive. So we also heard consistently throughout the workshop and survey comments the need for a district parking garage or central parking in downtown. And a number of these comments went on to describe that if central parking were achieved, or some other alternative. There was support for car-free streets and less on-street parking, and in general, more comments were in support of the wide sidewalks, more trees. We heard more comments to support those rather than to not have them. Staff also heard a number of warnings to consider the impact of setback changes to small lots, with sight lines, ramp access, and reduced parking on site being the concerns. And lastly, we also heard a number of comments on one-way streets, with up to 17 of the 47 written comments received, which is about 36%, which we found was quite interesting. So from ADP, I actually wasn't at this meeting, but I did watch it and took a lot of notes. So we also heard concerns from this team around hydro lines in the lane, having kind of messy street fronts and varying setbacks on some of these streets, and the importance of livable and walkable sidewalks, the importance of trees for the vibrancy and the economic growth of downtown. And we also heard concern for 2nd Avenue, design being too much paving, and they also, you guys also suggested to staff to look at other municipalities like Victoria and Nelson around their road right-of-ways, and as well how they have considered one-way streets, and we've actually done that as well.
Okay, so now we're going to jump into the options that we're proposing to move the bylaw forward. The 3 options around employment space are all quickly summarized here, and I'll just preface by saying that option B is the one that staff's intending on recommending to council. So the first option A is what we originally proposed, so that's having employment space at street level continuously along the frontage, all frontages, and then as well as a second level, which could be the 2nd story or any other story above, again along the street frontage, and both of those would be to a minimum of 10 meters deep, which was thought to be the average needed to achieve a functional CRU or a functional space. Option B, this is what we're kind of labeling as the flex option. So instead of requiring the minimum 10-meter depth, it would be just requiring either a percentage amount of the lot, so a percentage of the FAR, or a percentage of the building, so a percentage of GFA, or some kind of amount that's in relation to the amount of residential space that's being provided on the street. So we haven't decided upon a number or fallen on a number. We're looking for guidance from council before we take this further to see if they're even in support of option B. But it was us trying to listen to the comments around flexibility and leaving the designer more room while still achieving the goal of getting employment space, but it can go in wherever the designer wants to put it or wherever the developer wants to put it. And then C is basically the same as A, but with the 2nd story employment space eliminated. So it's only requiring employment space at street level along frontage to the minimum 10-meter depth. So this is, next slide, is just a really quick schematic of what this could look like for the various options. So A is the 1st and 2nd story. B, it's still along the street frontage, but then it's anywhere else in the building as well. And then C is just the 1st story at grade to the minimum 10-meter depth. So that's it for the employment space options. I'm almost thinking before
we
dive into your stuff that maybe we should just talk about
Let's do it.
this. Actually, sorry to change.
Yeah, we can do it. There's parking is a piece of it that we'll also plan to present a little bit here, but
At the end.
But maybe just talking about these options might be.
Yeah, Carrie's is quite a bit more complicated, so if you guys want to provide your feedback just on the employment space options now, we're open to that.
I think option B is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's ability to let people go anywhere from putting it all on the roof, so it can be a fantastic restaurant, or all face the back alley because they want to do really creative stuff that is different than the front. Understanding that the developer is not going to spend millions of dollars in having someone's living room face onto Cleveland on the ground floor. So there will be a sensibility that will naturally come that's driven by whoever is going to build this building that will make sure that people don't do something really ridiculous.
And we also thought a strong point for option B was that actually you'd end up with a really wide variety of spaces. So there are those types of businesses that are looking for like really small or maybe something that's a bit more obscure so the price comes down for them versus these like really plush, massive employment spaces that are not going to be for all the businesses that are in Squamish.
The ones that may not actually, not only need, but they don't even necessarily want street frontage, like it's like quieter offices that are backing onto different areas that can be. My only concern with that is just that it's considered very well, any loopholes that developers could use to, that those are closed to get out of it.
So this is your risk in that. The building code will drive certain separations for like assemblies, for restaurants, and for office spaces, and one being above the other, and if one is sprinklered, everything underneath it must be sprinkled. I think you should use option A to set this is the area of commercial space that you require, so let option A, so you get your commercial area that you want.
You mean use what you'd get percentage-wise from option A and use that number
as that will
to
be your area
guide?
It's high. I think you have to be
It's
really
quite high.
careful what that percentage is, because it could
Yeah.
be, what I hear from the workshop meetings are, these bylaws are great, but they're unrealistic. It's not gonna happen. So I think we have to be careful that we foster what you want and not put a percentage that cripples you because of parking or fire building code.
Let me comment.
I don't know what that number
let me take that further. Allowing the user to use commercial space as residential, but the zoning allows them to go both ways. So once we run out of commercial space, then it allows you guys to start enforcing that as commercial, so that the people don't have a whole bunch of empty commercial. That's where the flexibility can become very interesting. So flexibility can either be allowing for anything from a liquor store to a restaurant to that type of flexibility, and the other type of flexibility is allowing the stuff to go anywhere in the building and letting it change over time. That's the use. And I understand it.
So I mean like a live work or some play on that aspect. So we did talk about that as an option, but other places, it's been a learning experience. A lot of places that are live work over time transition to live only, just because it's dominating, like that is what most people are in need of, and it's just how that, so I think there's certain ways that we could try to ensure that it didn't become pure residential, like not allowing for stratification, and putting covenant on top, like there's different regulatory tools that we could use.
Or building code ones too.
But we're not recommending live work as an option for the downtown core. For downtown south, we totally see that, and even for like more of the west area as that whole residential area transitions. But in the core of downtown, we're hoping to lean more to pure commercial, like pure employment space, and not really allow that, because we don't think that it will convert back to commercial even when the market catches up.
And Asia wrote a little bit more, there's a little bit more in the report around that if you want to dive into it more, for rationale.
You can tie it to, like people in places like Nanaimo, if they have a suite in their house, they pay extra taxes for that. So in the same way, there can be bylaws that say if there's no business license for this space, and if there's no corporation that is a commercial lease for this space, then the taxes are different. So there are ways that you guys, and I understand it becomes complicated, but building this flexibility into it can really allow people to develop stuff with confidence now, what you want, without feeling that they're going to be tied into something for the next 10 years that they can't afford.
We hear that. One other thing we talked about in terms of option B for the percentage or the proportion would be, we've heard that small lots are challenging on all different levels. So maybe that percentage is smaller for smaller lots, given what we know about those lots, and larger for those bigger assemblies. So
I think it
that's
should be
also
percentage
something
of built
that we're-
area too, because otherwise you're forcing people to max out, which we brought up on height too, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's percentage of
built area.
Of built,
GFA,
Yeah, so, and these were totally the
Balance.
comments that
Yeah.
we wanted to hear from you guys, because
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if FAR would be better, or.
Because then you're forced to build, call it 2,500 square feet of commercial. Well, to
To get
offset
your
that investment, you're gonna have to go to 6 stories.
Yeah.
So you're gonna force that, whereas if you build, on a single 25-foot lot, a 3,000 square foot side by side, and the ground floor is commercial, that will probably work as a percentage of what's built, I think. And I think it's great that you don't have that 10-meter depth, because that's a really monotonous,
Yeah, and it
random
doesn't cater
dart
to
at-
these other smaller
I
businesses
think
that
so. And
might not
parking
be able
eats up
to
so
afford
much ground floor space, that becomes really hard on the small lots.
It was a concern that we had, and it was raised around this, is that we're ensuring that we have adequate ground floor commercial space. But I feel that in the past, we may not have had that much width, but we're seeing in new applications that they are taking that into consideration, and it's just kind of happening natural. And it's kind of an organic piece, and maybe, the comments that we heard is to kind of keep that organic, and that it's still, whatever's can be viable, they'll make it work. So then you get some diversity in the mix, right?
And developers will be very cautious to go and spend the money in building something that they can't lease out because it's too unpractical.
Mhm.
And that will drive that natural, make sure that it's practical for use, yeah.
That's my main concern would be, is that the market will dictate whether those units go if you don't specify them. So if people are paying less for that particular use, it's going to go to the back lane where it's really potentially no good for the people in those rooms. So they want exposure, right? They want to be potentially on the street face.
But it makes it less expensive.
Yeah, cheaper, but
Which is
also,
sometimes the better place to put it, right?
yeah, you will also want to create a bit of sense of activity, community, something happening
On your
the street.
on your
Yeah,
main
and you don't just want this big wall of this is all residential. There's nothing going on here, because then you start to exclude that street.
Yeah.
What you can also do is,
Oh, no, that's it. It's trying to find that balance, and the issue is obviously the market, right? And yeah, I don't know if there's. It kind of comes down to what do you want to achieve.
And we're trying to, really the goal of the zoning bylaw proposals is ultimately to try to implement the vision that sees our downtown core as our main employment, shopping, retail, services, and with the development that we've seen in the past year or so, it's like we're getting residential, and that's all, and it's quite tokenism for the amount of employment space that we've been getting, so.
No, because we saw one last week and it was purely residential.
Well, there's the one on
the
Victoria that now lost the second foot, which is a great learning thing. I think it's exactly what is the hardest thing to write these for.
Yeah.
So
And that kind of tipping point for that application was the parking,
Yeah.
so that's what we're gonna get to
Always.
later on,
yeah.
and to have that discussion, so.
You brought up, just to complete your point, you brought up a point around the percentage of that's on, or how much is on the street. And
Yeah.
currently, we don't have anything. We have policy in our OCP that speaks to having commercial frontages in the downtown, be street facing, but we don't require it. It's not like it's not within the zone, and it's not regulated that way. So, it's one thing to consider the percentage itself for the whole building, but also maybe the percentage, especially with corner lots. We see this where it's kind of, we'll just do one side for the commercial and then we'll keep the other. And you see that with the artisan building, we just have, it's just on Victoria, and anything on Third is just parking garage there. So, there's how much of that percentage, and trying to fine grain those numbers is another point that
I
we're
think
going to
with the commercial requirements for parking, though, it's going to be hard to get that much frontage. Just eats up, because we aren't not going underground very often, or multi-story except on the big ones. It's pretty hard to get around that. And I think my last point would be really crucial. We have definitions for live work, or don't use that in the. It's kind of a common thing that's in all discussions, so I think we need to define it. What's office space? What's commercial space? What's employment space? Are they all one and the same? I try to push, obviously, but no. Then there has to be
they're called out differently, so yes, we will have to really pay attention to.
And how to regulate that. It's one thing to call it live work space, but I think what you had mentioned too about how, with taxes or what methods there are of actually knowing what's occurring in that space too, which would be good to know for future, just from a, a survey standpoint too. To see
I have
what
a feeling this will be a big, for whatever ends up coming out of the pipe, this will be a big learning process for us for this.
Your ground floor, even if people don't put in commercial there, you can say that your ground floor must have a ceiling height of, let's say, 10 feet, whatever it is, 12 feet. And so even if people put residential in there to start off with,
Well, you can't do residential downtown anyways.
yeah, but then we know that it can change to
Because of the floodplain.
commercial can potentially go in there.
Yeah, and we've discussed the height aspect.
Yeah, the incentivized higher ceilings on the ground floor gives some bonus height on top. I thought was a good one from the last workshop.
South.
Yeah.
But I think that the flexibility will, I think you guys will be very happy with what you see people are going to come back with what they do with the commercial space. And the long-term result of allowing businesses to find quirky things that they can do and how that will change the feel of the downtown into not becoming Vancouver, but unique Squamish, because there's street here that is different and the feel here is different and the scale is different, and I think that will build on this and it will make it special without trying to force
So was I not hearing because of the floodplain, you're sort of, if you're a developer, you're just like, well, what else am I going to put there, right?
Parking.
Parking,
Yeah.
storage.
Yeah.
And that's the
one
loophole.
thing, the one thing we're
No.
concerned about is an example is on the Artisan building where the parkade is almost to the street, but there's a
Gallery.
corridor almost, that's like an art gallery display.
Yeah.
That is kind of the buffer between the two, and it doesn't necessarily work very well, so, yeah, it's pretty much unusable space.
Okay.
How deep is that?
It's like a normal
8 foot or something.
corridor
What's
with,
The thing with that though is that it's like this long corridor, so yes, what's somebody gonna do other than put artwork
Gallery.
in there is have it as a gallery, but even if that was required, that there was some sort of access that was put into that you could have like little small like micro spaces, but they have to obviously have their own individual access in there too, but that's
I'm
like an
assuming
interesting
for-
way of using the space, because it could have one desk with like a graphic designer working in it that has street frontage, people can come and go, but would be very, very cost effective for like a sole proprietor to be able to operate out of it and not be working in their home if they want to actually have a commercial space.
awesome, this is all great feedback. Any final comments before we move on to Carrie's?
I have another suggestion too, would be, because there are obviously so many different ways of interpreting all of this, is that once something came down and was finalized, that was what the district wanted to move forward, is hosting some sort of like forum discussion and invite like design professionals, engineers, like anybody that's having to do builders, host some sort of discussion event whereby everybody could talk about the ideas they have. Like, because somebody like Derek had just brought up, like a rooftop restaurant. It's a brilliant way of being able to get sun, gorgeous views. It would vitalize a building in a way that's not doing it on the ground level. Well, that may not ever occur to a builder or even to another designer that doesn't think that that's possible. But even sort of putting it out there in the larger world so that Squamish can become a hub of like innovation. Like when you get a bunch of creative people together, like even all of us, we're all feeding off of our own comments and it leads to somewhere else too. So I think to see some real benefits come out of it would be great to get
allowing
that
the
discussion.
flexibility is the key thing that will allow for as much variety in commercial, anything from the sole proprietor to the mom and pop shop, anybody. If you guys can ensure the flexibility, whether it's going on the back alley, put all the commercial in the back alley. Why? Because it's different. I can have my tables here, my chairs, umbrellas, the whole works, and you just create that special place. It just drives that thing, which would be very special.
Yeah, that was the only other point in the current downtown C4 is doesn't allow residential access from the lanes. That was one I'd push for, is be open to other access points to the property. And the other one was you're not allowed more than one building on the lot. They're kind of leftovers, but they would help with this sort of flexibility, I think.
For sure.
Otherwise, we're starting to see that in all the workshops, is everyone seems to want flexibility. some of the new zonings are supporting that, so it's good. It's great.
And I think you guys can put a lot of trust in that. Once you put very broad views into this, like you have to have this percentage of commercial, the money supporting this will make sure that it's sensible. And you guys can put a lot of trust into that. People that spend millions of dollars on this stuff, they will make sure that your commercial is viable. They're not going to sit with an empty space for forever now.
Great. Okay. Do you want to take a stab at?
This is the fun part, guys. Okay. So I thought I'd bring you back because it's a little bit more complicated. Just to the original bylaw amendment. So the original proposal that we had was to have 2.5 meter setbacks. So this is principal building setbacks from the street, from Pemberton, 3rd Avenue, and 2nd Avenue. This would give us a 25 meter road right of way. And the idea and concept behind it was to get, so that we can ensure that we'll get 2 lanes of parking and that we can accommodate the separated bike lanes or the bike lanes that were in our active transportation plan that were approved in 2016. And then, but also we can put some street trees in, because I think maybe people here can acknowledge that we don't have very many trees downtown on these streets. And then also to acknowledge that we do need some wider sidewalks. We have great wide sidewalks on Cleveland, but don't have the space or haven't kind of built those out on 2nd and 3rd quite to the same width. And so we're seeing that there's a lot of best practices that show that we should be reaching towards that. So what we ended up doing is that we broke all of these streets into their own piece, and we're dealing with them separately, so that we're not just blanketing 2.5 meters. We're realizing there's differences to each street. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into each street and dive into some of them have just one option, others have 2 options that we'll be presenting, and we're hoping to get council's direction and your guys' direction as to which option you guys prefer. So for 3rd Avenue, staff have only proposed one option, and that is to stay consistent with the original bylaw amendment for 2.5 meter setbacks, which achieves all the space for all of those things I just mentioned above. And staff have only recommended one option for 3rd Avenue due to its strong rationale, which I'll go into a little further here. But if you guys have others that we should maybe consider, this will be the time to let us know. But the rationale being is that 3rd Avenue is an active and safe routes to school. It's designated a separated bike lane in the active transportation plan, and is a key connection that we see going from Buckley to Bailey all the way down to the ocean front as that develops and grows. The other piece is that there's no hydro lines in the lanes either to the east or the west of this street, so there's no implications in terms of buildable area or the concerns that we heard around that. There's no potential for that. And then it's widely undeveloped, leaving kind of leaving a lot of opportunity, I think, for this area to grow, and then kind of eliminating the concern for this unsymmetrical street frontages. Currently we have a lot of residential lots, and then mixed in with some commercial C4 lots and C10 lots, and some comprehensive development zones in there as well. So it's already kind of not symmetrical, and we currently have, I think for residential it's 7.62 meters setback for their frontage anyway. So we feel like there's an opportunity. This is the time to change it if we do want to try and make sure we have enough space for everything. There's a large road right-of-way precedent already here in Squamish. For any of our main streets like Cleveland and Main Street, we have 25 meter road right-of-ways, which is how we can achieve those wide sidewalks on Cleveland. And that we did look into Nelson and Victoria. I got on their GIS, I did a whole bunch of measurements, and we looked at their one-way streets and their setup. But what we found is that any of their major, like their core downtown network, and obviously Victoria is a much bigger municipality than the district here, but Nelson's a population of 10,000, which is half of ours, and any of their streets are 30 meter road right-of-ways on their big ones, and then on average it's 22.5 meters for their secondary downtown streets. So they are quite wider. There's definitely some variability in some of the streets, especially Victoria being a kind of a an older design that way. They have some that are 11 meters, but obviously don't accommodate all these pieces. So there are two options for Second Avenue, option E and option F. Option E is no setbacks. So reverting back to the original 20-meter road right-of-way. This still maintains 2 parking lanes, as we heard that was an important one to keep. And then we add 2 furnishing zones, but then we take away the bike lanes. So I'll get into the rationale for each of these, but I'll just briefly go through each one. And then option F is a 1.5 meter setback, so that's a 1 meter decrease from the 2.5 meter original one that we had proposed. This gives us a 23 meter road right-of-way, and still maintains the 2 parking lanes. We still get the 2 furnishing zones, but we've removed the buffer in the bike lane, and there's smaller sidewalks on this one too. So I'll dive into the rationale for each of these. Oh, there's little icons for all this. Anyway, so the rationale for E is actually the staff recommended option, and this is kind of why, is that staff see the value of the community's comments around excessive bicycle lanes and recognize that separated bike lanes on 3rd Avenue are potentially sufficient for the north-south cycling needs, especially if we do get another connection down in the loggers lane side as well. Staff value ADP's concerns for too much pavement, and this option, and this was also one of staff's concerns too before even bringing this out, and that we see that this option will significantly reduce the pavement's width of 2nd Avenue. And we do note that cyclists may still need to use, will still have to use 2nd Avenue and to access retail or residential, and that it's recommended that this design also include bike share lanes like we see in Cleveland Avenue. And I know they have their issues, and they're not the best, but that we think that there's also, in the design of this, the final design, we should also be considering that in the future, should we have more mode share shift, should we we're seeing a lot of cyclists, we're seeing maybe some conflicts on these streets, that we should be considering now how we could maybe remove a lane of parking in the future, or actually put, we have 3 meter sidewalks here, so maybe we make them, multi-use pathways, maybe there's space enough to put a bike lane on there as well. So trying to be conscious of that design of where the future's going and how can we potentially accommodate bike lanes in the future. So option F proposes a 1.5 meter setback and is therefore closer to the original bylaw that we propose, and it too has some strong rationale. We feel that bike lanes are safer than share roads for most users, and that bike lanes increase commercial and sales and value. That there's already an existing variable frontage in 2nd Avenue. If you walk down 2nd, there's actually a number of parking lots that take up the frontage, a number of driveway accesses, which we don't have on Cleveland. It's not as symmetrical as Cleveland Avenue, and there's still a lot of room to grow. And we feel that 1.5 meters is not as much of a variability that would be a concern. And that we did recognize that there's one laneway on the east side of 2nd Avenue that has, and it's not for the whole length of 2nd Avenue, but there are some hydro poles back there on the side closest to those properties. So that could potentially, we currently have our bylaws say to underground those hydro lines, but it could potentially impact some of that buildable area. So we do recognize that as a concern, and feel that in return, if we get a 1.5 meter setback, that actually gives more space in the rear, because currently we do have a setback in the rear right now. So we feel that could help alleviate that concern. And then we also suggest, we feel it's still kind of a wide paved surface, so we either suggest painting the bike lanes a different color, give them a different treatment, or maybe it's the parking spaces that you'd want to treat differently, and then to kind of reduce the impact of how wide that is. So setback options for Pemmican are even more challenging and complicated, but because as this corridor is a key gateway for connecting existing and proposed multi-use trails to downtown, and the potential to the new gateway to downtown with the development of the waterfront landing, we made sure to consider both active transportation and vehicle growth in the proposed options. So I'm gonna like to highlight just a few of those today to give you some context of the future growth of this street before diving into these options, because I feel like it gives some context. So first, for active transportation purposes, given that the relatively new, this is the separated, we have like a bi-directional bike lane on this side, but given that relatively new shoppers, there's relatively new shoppers, BMO Bank, and a brand new Vantage development are along the north side of Pemberton. It's, here's a, let's see here, development in the next 5 years on these properties, which may impact how much streetscape width and setback we can actually achieve on this street. So therefore, when we're considering, sorry, I've got all these little visuals, this is where I wanted to get to. So this little section here, it's kind of relatively quite new, so we want to make sure that we're considering setbacks. When we consider setbacks, that we may actually not actually get that setback on that side. So what does that road right-of-way really look like along this section? So we've actually separated our design options. And again, these are preliminary designs, but we separated them from loggers to third and loggers to the rail line is how we've described them. And then another consideration for Pemberton is increased vehicle capacity coming from the new waterfront landing and second downtown gateway entrance from the highway, which may also require more turning lanes, as you can see about the different options here in blue. And then it's also the potential new truck route. So these are considerations when we want to look at street design, width of drive aisles, etc. How much space do we have? What are we working with? And so that also supported us dividing this into two different designs. So for option, there's option G and option H. The option G is recommended, and this one is to have a 1.5 meter setback on both sides, but really realistically from the loggers to third section, as I spoke to earlier, that really we probably won't get that 1.5 on the other side. So that leaves us with a 21.5 meter road right of way. That gives us 1 lane of parking and 1 furnishing zone, but with the potential to possibly put some trees in areas where we can't actually have parking, so in areas where there's sightline issues. So, and then also to have a turning lane. We currently have one on Cleveland now, or sorry, on Pemberton now, and that we would expect with the increased vehicle capacity that we would want to maintain a few more. Then the loggers to the rail line would be a full 23 meter road right of way. We get 2 lanes of parking and 2 furnishing zones, and also accommodate wider drive aisles for trucks. So the rationale, I kind of spoke to some of them already, but 1 lane of parking was supported by the community's feedback, but not the loss of both. So the south side currently has 24 parking stalls compared to the 4 on the north side. So without increasing transportation alternatives, the loss of the south parking would likely not be supported by the community. So in addition, parking along the north side is not very feasible, which is why there are limited stalls to begin with. And there are too many drive aisles and sightline concerns to add more parking, even if we were to achieve the 2.5 meter setbacks in the future. And a large section of the north side is currently being used as the downtown transit hub. So we feel like this is the best side to basically put that separated bike lane in, and that we shouldn't be trying to make wider streets so that we can accommodate two lanes of parking. The ones at the furnishing zone, as I said, we could possibly get a few more trees on the other side as well, and we feel that that's still getting one side as a benefit to that street. And lastly, the addition of consistent turning lanes is a key one here as we expect future growth. And then the last one here is currently we really want to keep those 2 lanes of parking because that area is already there's perpendicular parking right now. It's used quite frequently for a lot of parking. So we want to ensure that we're being conscious of that. And the furnishing zone would be in line with all the development that we're seeing on the waterfront landing side and the gateway as a nice, beautified area to enter downtown into. So that's an important piece. And then currently, we actually have 2.4 meter sidewalks on Pemberton right now. And so we really tried to actually keep and maintain some of that width. But for this option, we had to bring it down a little bit more. So last one, and I'll stop talking because I know it's a lot to take in here. But option H proposes no setbacks. It still maintains the 20 meter road right of way. It keeps that sidewalk width that I spoke to, which was 2.4 meters. It keeps the separated bike lane, which is in the active transportation plan. And it also, it adds at least one furnishing zone to the area. And the big change here is that there's no parking. And the piece to support the no parking is that as we have a lot of precedent for gateway entrances into downtown, from Pemberton to the highway on Cleveland, there is no parking. Any of these kind of entranceways don't typically have them, as well as with truck routes, we don't typically support parking on long truck routes either. So there's precedent to potentially support that. And then the average, we keep the average sidewalk width, and then the other piece is there's no buildable area lost. And so the other benefit for that was because we did hear a lot of comments around the corner lots that they don't actually have lanes in the back, so they actually will be losing some buildable area. So this option doesn't lose any of that. So I lied. I'm supposed to now talk about the parking considerations, and I'll add those the last piece. And we'll maybe dive into the setbacks first, and then we'll get into this. But we did hear a lot of comments around parking, and we acknowledge that that's important to everything that we're discussing here today in the employment space and the setback change. We heard a lot about a parking garage, but we are proposing to add on to this bylaw amendment some changes to our bylaw as well around the parking consideration, around our parking regulations. And one is to increase the cash in lieu amount to reflect cost of a parking garage or to support alternative transportation. We found that we can actually use those costs to potentially do other stuff as well. And that's how other municipalities and districts are doing as well. And then also to amend the cash in area to provide equality between Cleveland Avenue and other commercial streets. So Cleveland Avenue currently has, you can cash in lieu as many commercial stalls as you want, but any other street downtown, there's a limit to 4 stalls. So we're trying to kind of maybe find a happy medium and change that divide. So that's it. Do you want to take it street by street?
Yeah.
Okay.
Help keep it organized.
This is a good trial run for us because there's a lot of context in here. I probably will cut some of it. Okay, so this is our option D, 3rd Avenue.
Yeah, Derek's got to head out.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for the time.
Okay.
Right.
Email us your comments if you have any other questions. Thanks, Derek.
Flexibility.
Heard it.
So this is separated all the way down. How do you connect to, say, the oceanfront lines? It goes right to the terminals. So do you have a connection to get to the oceanfront, or is it? And where does this end?
Yeah, in the active transportation plan, there's designated places, and then there's these like green polka dot things. Like we haven't figured it out, but there's supposed to be a connection here. So
Yeah.
it's going to be one of those things that we know we have the new what's that street called?
Westminster.
Westminster. That's a like we have a road right of way there. We could make
Yeah.
a connection through that one. There's a potential to, increase the turtle trail and have that be the connection. There's
Right.
a lot of opportunity there. It's just
And then
hasn't been spelled out
to
yet.
the south as the east-west connector, the other separated
Oh.
bike lane is proposed to be Main Street.
Yeah.
So I think at least as an interim solution, you'd come down 3rd, go
Yeah.
onto Main Street, and then hit whatever oceanfront's building along Walter's.
That's a better answer. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Does anyone not think that this is a red flag option? Think we should explore something else?
I like the fewer bike lanes spread out. Or how do you say that? Fewer bike lanes on every street. So one dedicated on 3rd, I think is more important. Or I'd kick back again the one of, what about the laneways being a bike lane? So we kind of don't talk about it, but it's such an asset to have downtown. And we don't, not many cars there, it's quiet, it's protected. I think that could be a way to appease the public of wanting a secondary bike lane, and then we don't have to do the setbacks as big. I think 2.5 is asking a lot of developers when we want development, and probably I was curious the percentage split of who commented on the setback versus we want it. It's probably public members who want wider streets and furniture, and the people who said no are probably landowners and developers who are like, that crushes our performance. So I think maybe there's something there. Carrie, I thought your comment about building in resiliency was amazing to hear. You know, that we might not have it all figured out right now, but we could take away.
That's for second.
That was on second.
Yeah, but I think for everything, I think it's how we should be looking at it. It's flexibility for the bylaws and thinking that the width can accommodate a change in, you know, if we don't have cars downtown at all, like I was in Santiago, Chile, and there's no cars downtown between 9 and 5 p.m. Like, that's been there for a while. So I think that was a great point I heard. So yeah, I'd say one for just one bike lane. I forget which option that was, but.
I think that's a really interesting point with the laneways. If you're going to approach this approach of changing setbacks and such on the major route and providing the bikes on that road, and then alternative bike lanes within the lanes, and then as car usership goes down over the years through all the means that you had mentioned, maybe then on second you can take away that parking lane and it turns into the bike lane in the future, as opposed to making drastic changes on all the streets. I'm not sure, but just as an option of, with the flexibility of letting, as the carbon decreases, now we can take over with more bike lanes. Vancouver's doing that as an example, where they're shutting down parking on full frontages and turning it into bike lanes instead. So, not sure.
I guess the consideration here with it being the active and safe routes to school is trying to keep in mind that this is designed for children and you know, vulnerable or people who you wouldn't maybe pick up cycling or wouldn't try to do that. So we're trying to like appease that. That's what it's being built to. And with given our lanes are 6 meters, and we're currently supposed to fit 2 vehicles going back and forth within that. That takes up that whole space. And we know that there's research that supports the benefit of separated bike lanes to actually make to shift that usability. And we see that once you actually put the pavement down and put a separated bike lane in visibly for people, that it itself shifts behavior. It's not the lanes, it's not the paint on the pavement. That only shifts a percentage of people. And kind of coming up with, there are awesome alternatives for sections, but this is a huge portion of a commuter from Buckley all the way down. So I think that's where we need to ensure that that's a
One idea that you guys talked about in relation to downtown south was having the advisory lanes where it's like anything goes. If you're driving a car down a lane, you got to be looking out for all other different types of things, and there's like kind of like things that bump out and people have to weave their way through the lane, and it like just creates a lot more like shared ownership of those back lanes. So I know that was only talked about in downtown south, but if that idea floats or goes any further down the line, then it could be something that we start pulling like in all the different areas of downtown.
They paved downtown right now, the lanes? Or they paved some?
And there are a lot of them paved or not, a lot of them are in fairly rough condition. But just one more comment about laneways. One issue that we have, like as you guys probably already know, like our north-south blocks in Squamish are almost 200 meters long, and we have some connectivity issues with our lanes. Like I know, between Cleveland and Second, there's properties that span the whole, like that cut off. There's a giant parking lot where the dollar store and stuff is, and there's like a number of places, and Pemberton doesn't connect between Second and Third. Like, so there's a few of those. So it's like when you start thinking about how you're wanting to get people, like from the waterfront trail to Buckley, like to government road per se, and like you start to go, ooh, and then also too, like I, sort of echoing what Carrie said about, let's get the bikes out on the street, like let's have them be the priority, not tuck them in the laneway. Like, I mean, although I think we have a long way to go in terms of making our laneways quaint and more accessible for pedestrians and more like life to them.
Yeah.
I think we'd all love to see that. And I think that having said that, I really would like to see that like the priority be out there. And
Well, I think people use lanes whether they want to, for biking if they want to, so that's always an option. I worry about the 2.5 meter. You're depending on private landowners to piecemeal this. The district can't go in with magic money and do Pemberton to Westminster Street as one agenda, budget item, right? If you're requiring this 2.5 meter to make that streetscape, everyone's concerned, mine is too, is when's it gonna happen?
Yeah. So we have
20 years?
Yeah, no, and it is partly there's development, and this is changing, and especially with our new OCP that's going to come out, downtown is changing, evolving. We also have an active transportation budget every year, and one of them is actually we're using that this year to create some designs once we get some direction around this. So we are making steps, and that will help at least if we don't get full blocks, we can cash in lieu and piecemeal pieces, and that's how some of the municipalities are getting this done right now. But that the intention is to budget for these as they come on board. The other, I wanted to say one more thing and now I can't remember.
well, actually, we had this conversation the other day where one of the advantages, because we could fit this in a little, like we could fit all you're seeing with a bit of an adjustment in a slightly smaller setback.
Yeah.
The challenge we have is that because we're forced to do this piecemeal, development by development, or as we have funding, like Third is a really good example where, say, we could fix something up on the west side, but we're going to then be stuck with cyclists in a ditch on the east side because of the existing infrastructure. So what the 2.5 does is it actually gives you a bit of a slush space to like make it all work as we go, so that we aren't, because this is the problem we're running into like all over Squamish, because we effectively just have a strip of asphalt for 2 travel lanes, maybe a meter and a half of bike lane on each side. As soon as you fix up one side, the cyclists are now in the ditch. So we're...
The other one the point I wanted to make is that along Third, there's not a loss of buildable area, right? This is, it's just shifting back. So right now the zoning bylaw says that your front setback can be at 0 and your rear is 3.5 meters. So it's shifting that space up to the front a little bit more. So again, it's not, we have here the concerns around, the lane and having, less space in the lane and how that makes some things challenging. We've been working with an architect to kind of look at the feasibility. Is this still doable? And what we heard is that the setbacks don't affect the building. So what we really hear is that it's a loss of buildable area, and we feel that we're also addressing that too.
It's good to hear. And same with the hydro line confirmation.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
We should keep moving.
Yeah, okay. Second. Thank you. Which option do you guys like?
And staff are recommending option E.
Yeah.
So no setback, pretty much fitting everything in status quo the way the roads are now.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I think the comments that came up a lot was like it's a wide street already. So yeah, I would support E. It's great.
And that's more of a commercial street currently than
Yeah,
what
so you
Third
get
is.
really,
There's
like,
more.
with option E, you're getting really, really wide sidewalks that allow businesses to then start utilizing that sidewalk area for patio space and other activation.
So picture Cleveland. Right now, drive aisles along Cleveland are wider than 3.1 meters, which is average. So picture Cleveland, but like basically smaller drive aisles and smaller parking that way. But about the exact same amount of width in terms of sidewalk entries.
So hoping that actually slows people down as well.
Yeah.
That's a comment about looking at Victoria, because Johnson Street on Victoria is probably one of the lower Johnson is one of the narrowest streets in there. And then as it goes north of Blanchard, north of Douglas to Blanchard, it goes super wide, but it's dead down there. And whereas the lower Johnson is one of the most bustling at all times of day and night areas of the city. So keeping that corridor with the bike lanes on Third, and then just allowing to keep that tighter, more vibrant space on Second, that's why it supports E.
sure.
It's a really important
Yeah.
street with the park and the connection to Cleveland and
Yeah.
so, and that is one, there probably could be a street rollout of trees maybe, or something to, rebrand that street on the district line, would be nice. Banners maybe?
I really like your word resiliency. I might.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
really forward thinking to hear that,
Yeah.
because you can't, these are so complicated. This is way more digested than the first round, so I totally commend you guys on this. And there's some really good pullouts in all the streets that I've heard, so I think thinking that this isn't you're gonna revisit this, whether it's with cars or people's habits or development, I think, yeah, brilliant way to
And
think
then
about
option F, I think, was too much of a compromise with the bike lanes. Like,
Yeah.
we're not getting the separated lanes that are needed to actually get useful mode shift. So it's like a compromise of like, we're not really committing to it, and it's kind of a half-ass.
Yeah.
Mhm.
One foot in, one foot
Call
out.
it the ugly compromise.
Yeah, so we definitely weren't leaning towards that option.
What's the opportunity in E to take out one of the parking lanes and put in a two-way bike lane, maybe reducing one of the sidewalks slightly in order to get a tight two-way in?
Yeah, I think that's because usually the lowest recommendation is 3 meters, right, for what they call it a bidirectional bike lane.
Right.
And we're reducing our parking's at 2.5, and with a lot of these diagrams, we're showing 2.4. And that doesn't totally give us the full space, but we're thinking like redesign and, this is maybe long-term kind of side of things, like 10, 20 years down the road.
Because if one of the sidewalks got drilled down to 2.8, then you're giving yourself the opportunity to turn that parking lane into.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so to kind of bring it a little bit more.
Just wiggle it in just a touch so that you have that ability to turn it.
To change it,
You need buffer as well though, so, yeah.
Yeah, but maybe the buffers
No, I know
are
what
less
you mean, though.
robust, it's not a planter, it's maybe more
On
bollards.
second, you have quite a few drive aisles and such, so you have lots of
Driveways, you mean? Like-
driveways, yeah.
Yeah,
That'll change,
although those
though,
will be
probably.
disappearing.
Yeah.
quite a bit.
Bit by bit. But I like that point. What we'll do is we'll look into the minimum standard, like the lowest that maybe, TAC guidelines or NACTO guidelines are recommending.
Yeah.
And maybe we make a bigger parking, space on the one side for the potential.
Because as a biker, if you want a giver, you're gonna go to third. But if you just want to ride your bike and go, you can still go to second and get to where you want to be, because third's gonna have that third.
Yeah. That's kind of a cool idea. I know that would allow for a lot of, there's pop-up bike lanes that are happening a lot in a lot of these
Patios
cities
and
now.
stuff.
So the one piece here that you don't see, but you do see in this one, is that we still are proposing these curb bulges, these bump outs. So that actually, we'll have to consider if you're gonna use the parking as a throughway eventually in the future, we may need to consider not putting these in.
Or just don't put trees in.
Or making them more temporary.
Or making them,
Surface
yeah,
mount curbs.
yeah, so trying to figure out, that's where I kind of say, design will have to be thought about for sure how to do that.
Sure, can I add one comment to third, just so we're back there, is just
Yeah.
make sure if you do the setback requirement, that you're clear about allowing certain projections into those setbacks for the buildings, where they can recoup either, whether it's floor space, like Portland's got some great examples of I think they do the third floor up, you can project into that setback, or Canopy's one always comes up with continued covered walkways and stuff.
Yeah,
But just
that's a
give
totally
them something,
legitimate.
and it's probably a nice streetscape. I'll try to send you the ones from Portland.
Yeah, if you could, that'd be
Super
kind of
cool.
neat
Yeah.
to see, because, we say that all the time, but we haven't seen one. Yeah.
Or that Telus building.
Telus buildings,
downtown.
I don't know how they did that
That's
one.
crazy.
Yeah, I just drove by there yesterday.
Yeah.
The rainbow underneath.
Yeah.
Wild. Anyways.
And on second, Asia had noted all of the opportunity on the sidewalk for the businesses to spill in. I think that's really great. So when I say squeeze in the sidewalk, that's not taking away from that really great programming opportunity as well.
I think that's what
Just-
will revitalize second and bring life.
Yeah.
Draw people to
Outside
second.
patio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I think as well, when we think about the retrofit, maybe Richard can remind me, what's the width of 15 meters is second right now, from curb to curb face to curb face.
Yeah, less than that.
Anyway,
Yeah, 60.
I think the point is that, again, recognizing, just to your point about how this will be retrofitting anyway, we actually have the space that you're talking about, because right now we've got the angle parking and our drive aisles are quite wide, so it's definitely wider than what we're showing right now. So this option E is definitely a narrowing from what's there today by at least a couple
Quite a
of
bit.
meters, I think.
You're changing the curve line.
Yeah.
Sidewalk curb line, yeah, it's quite a bit.
So I mean, the point is that there's opportunity there to like revisit that a little. I mean, none of this is gonna happen overnight. It's not like we're.
Okay.
Yeah.
G, this is Pemberton.
It's definitely the most complicated.
Yeah.
I thought it was
Yeah.
great you separated it to loggers down, and that was
Yeah.
the other point. It was nice to see, and same north to south. I thought it was smart pickups and realistic about the developments that are in place along the north side of Pemberton. I like the more vehicle-dominated one, being a gateway. When we see the waterfront and when everyone's comments were kind of griping for more mixed use over there in the connection to Valley Cliff, I think it's great to think of it like Cleveland's entrance or the other examples you said of truck routes and stuff, less parking, wider sidewalks. I'd prefer that.
So you liked option H, this one.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, dominating the south side, right, with the bike lane, and squeezing trees
Yeah.
in. Yeah, I thought that was really good.
But so option H has no setback,
Yeah.
but maybe,
And it had-
I'm almost hearing that you like this, but a combination of it where maybe we don't have the loggers to the rail line connection, maybe is also still only one lane parking? Or are you
Yeah, I don't
saying
really
no
know that
parking?
end, to be honest. It's kind of I don't really know that street. Yeah.
Okay.
We just know there's a lot of people parking on it right now.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Yeah, in
Okay.
front of the hydro
Oh, yeah.
station, people
Yeah.
park perpendicular, like there's at least 15, I don't know,
Yeah.
20 vehicles.
By Marina Estates.
Marina Estates.
Yes, there's a lot of parking happening in that whole
That's
area.
why we overflow from all of downtown, kind of just parking and walking maybe.
It's a bit of both. I think it is coming from those residences there
Yeah.
and also from those automotive businesses that are needing, like they're really strapped for
Spillover.
space there.
Is it long-term parking? Is that a good place for metered parking? If people are just parking and leaving?
Well, the trouble is there's no chance that a future, like a collector road is gonna have perpendicular parking on it for one thing. That's, because right now on the north side, people are actually perpendicular parking, and then on the
Yeah.
south side, they're parallel.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, yeah,
it has to change almost completely from what it is, but I think the point that we're recognizing is that from one perspective,
Can you see?
like from a purely design perspective, it doesn't really make sense to support parking along that street. But we kind of don't know how we could get rid of all of it, because there's so much happening right now.
But from the tracks that way is going to be a 4-lane at least artery, isn't it? No?
Not for lane.
To the waterfront? What do they call it?
Waterfront, yeah.
So it's going straight into Waterfront Landing, it's not connect and
Oh, it's
then.
going to Clark Drive, to the highway.
And then, but it's not coming straight off the highway, it's gonna go through Waterfront Landing, is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yeah, on the side of it, like,
It will sort of parallel the highway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a 2-lane
south.
road.
2
Yeah.
lanes.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
To the Hospital Hill intersection.
Right.
There's no road pass over that.
But I mean, the key idea here is that this will be another gateway into downtown, and it could have the potential to become even busier than the current gateway from McDonald's, because people are depending on what's the fastest route
Or just a new
or whatever
overpass
the
or
way they're
exit.
coming in.
Yeah.
It has the potential, like Pemberton has the potential to become as busy as Cleveland in front of like the McDonald's kind of area. So
What's
we're
the
trying
zoning
to
for
grapple
that?
with that.
Yeah.
To the north of it, what's that zone for?
this?
Yeah.
A senior cell and something else. It's a weird one, yeah. Yeah,
Into the hydro station?
yeah, it's a weird one. Yeah. Yeah, but currently, this is new, but they added this like extra parking piece here. So Yeah, there's a lot of parking here. So this is, I've counted the parking stalls here, and there's 24 along this section, and then here I just kind of gave up.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of its own thing. And we recognize that as the street evolves, there's going to be a loss of parking. And as the street has already evolved, we already don't have, we've now just lost the last 4 stalls that are here, and that was part of the Vantage project.
I think you're going to want capacity of just moving
Yeah.
cars.
Yeah, and that's what
bikes.
we're,
And bikes.
Yeah, so I think that's the most important.
and that's really what we're trying to make the case here, is that it's not just about active transportation. We hear a lot of like, you know, oh, this is all just for the bike lanes, but it actually is just for functionality and making sure we have connections for all users. And that's why I really thought this slide also to look at why we needed the turning lanes or need to consider.
And is this,
truck routes.
so the bike lane on the south side, is that going to connect up with the portion of the bike lanes that come through Rose Park and under the bridge?
You got it.
On
Yeah.
the north side.
Yeah.
On the
So
north
that
side.
doesn't require any crossing these streets?
So the idea here, and Laura's doing a lot of work with this right now, but we're trying to minimize the impact of this intersection. So making sure that the separated bike lane comes along this east side. So you know, if the major road is coming down here and turning this way, that the bikes are coming this way and no one has to cross one another. So by keeping it north, on this north side here is really important. And then there would be a proper crossing for cyclists for the multi-use here, if that ever happens. And then it would also bring, basically you could come right to Valley Cliff and go over to Bailey and shoot over.
But then to the right of where the crossing is over the blind channel too, that would continue on
To
to
Rose
connect
Park.
to the Rose
Yeah.
Park.
This here, yeah, this goes all the way to the corridor trail.
Okay.
So you could basically bringing, I mean, the little point underneath there is all the different connections this Pemberton piece adds. And like we heard from the community, that had the strongest support to say, hey, we need separated bike lanes on here.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have to relocate that bus stop by Lemon Jar?
So this is a good point,
Shoppers?
because actually if we look at this, well, maybe we look at this slide too, but if we look at the turning lane, if we actually put the turning lane piece in, we may not need it for capacity wise all the way to 3rd, and that just gives us a space now to put the transit on that piece and then still move traffic.
On the north side?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
so
it's,
by shoppers.
so
You have
this-
what I call a bike
Yeah.
bypass
Yeah.
around the
Yeah.
bus, a little pedestrian refuge
Yeah.
on so you have your basic sidewalk, your bike lane, your pedestrian, where they would just hop on the bus point, and then there's lots of designs on that are, NACTO and other guides have come up with.
Yeah, so I think the 2 drive lanes would be, oh, the cursors, sorry guys. So the 2 drive lanes would be here, and then the bus lay-by would be here, like everything would shift over.
Yeah.
And then you'd still have a clear bike lane that goes continuously, no need for them to veer or shift.
Yeah.
Good.
But it might narrow, and you'd have things to slow down the cyclists and make sure that.
Turning across that
And
hard,
it may not
doesn't it?
be
It makes turning across that hard, doesn't it?
Well, you don't turn, that's the whole point, is that the bikes are coming straight through, but there's definitely gonna be pedestrian crossing,
At that area, yeah. But at the moving, I'm thinking of Georgia and Vancouver, where they've got the bike lane and the bus stops kind of together. If you want to turn right through those, you have to look for the bikes and look for the bus.
But this is more
Yeah.
mid-block, so
Okay.
you're not,
Okay.
Yeah.
should be,
But I know where you're speaking
And it's
of.
hard, it's really hard.
Yeah, and it's also hard for pedestrians that are getting off the bus.
Yep.
They have to be aware that there's a bike lane
Bikes,
going across, and
And that's
I
pretty
haven't
fast
stood
one.
at that spot and watched to see
It's
how
awkward.
functional
Yeah.
it works, but
But the thing to note is that, so Pemberton Avenue is actually a short-term active transportation project. We're supposed to do this in 5 years, kind of put the separated bike lane in. But we probably don't anticipate having that be the main transit hub as Squamish grows forever. So there's also consideration of where that could be relocated, but I think it's about ensuring that we can still achieve this stuff in the interim right now. And so what we're saying is, hey, it may be not the best solution, but there's still space for the bus.
It would seem to me as well that definitely separated bike lanes are like would be a huge priority, but also in this case with the flexibility with the parking stalls, that if all of a sudden that starts to become a major thoroughfare of going into downtown,
Yeah, we can pull
the
another
consideration
car lane.
is the parking is either eliminated on one or potentially even both sides to allow for that, but still keeping the bike lanes safe and separated.
Yeah, you might even want to eventually have some right turn lanes because traffic queues up when the train comes, so you can still allow people to like find another way out. Or you know, like I'm thinking eastbound. I know I'm getting into a little bit details here, but that's yeah. I don't know, but I know what you mean. Like I think it's hard for us to envision the type of capacity we're going to need as we build 6-story apartment buildings all over town.
And the potential for during, at 5 o'clock or 5:30, commuters coming back north, turning into the increasing residential downtown, is how many of them are going to go and get backed up for 2 lights at trying to make a right-hand or a left-hand turn into Cleveland. They're just going to go the other route. That could end up being as busy as the Cleveland intersection is at some point, too. So
No left-hand turns.
So, I mean, there's a few big things that we feel that there's going to be some pushback on this one on, and it is the loss of buildable area. If we, want to have a 1.5 meter setback for those corner lots, it is, balancing this need that we heard that we want parking. So we need to kind of we think that this is a good option because it's maintaining the south parking, and it is preserving potentially the parking on. From the loggers to the rail line section as well. But we also heard, from the community that, hey, be progressive, like let's go car free, let's, once we have options and stuff. But if, if I'm hearing that is support as well for the H, or maybe even something in the middle, I'd love to hear.
But what about the trees?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the tough one is we don't really, as this grows. We may put in a separated bike lane, and we could probably do that and retrofit some of that in with the space that we already have in there. But as this grows and the waterfront landing is a 10-year project, as we see the increase in capacity, our rationale is that more space the better. And we want to make sure that it's not wasted space, but we really feel that even in these examples, we've squished everything in.
Can the trees be the separated buffer instead of the planter? Those planters like in Vancouver that I've seen are just maintenance nightmares, and they look great when they went in, and then they're just junk now.
They just need a lot more width in terms
because of serviceability and separating the.
Yeah.
Like there's smaller trees we could do in them or something.
Not really.
No.
Trees aren't too small. Like the chunk sizes in this area just get too enormous.
We kind of put a little bit of a little gardening thing in here to indicate that you could do the nice flower basket or the.
Well, that's what I mean.
Well, so that's what we're proposing for this to kind of still provide some greenery.
You do like in-ground grasses or something? I guess not if it's next to a road.
No.
I mean, it's not inconceivable to do that. I mean, it's just that like we've kind of been setting our minimum tree size as being 1.5 because we feel like any smaller than that it just starts to get weird, and none of the trees downtown have survived that have been. Mind you, we don't exactly know what's been put underneath. And that obviously is key as well.
Yeah.
But just as a rule of thumb for ourselves, because you can play with these all day and lose your mind. So we have 1.5 for trees. So theoretically, you could make that a buffer, and then you're just going to pinch away from your sidewalks. Like it's possible.
Because it's a good. Yeah, it'd be sure nice to have some consistency in our treescape downtown. It really makes streets and shade. So
it's so much more pleasant.
It is.
But would you almost like with the illustration here, like actually have like a double layer of it, or just eliminate the?
It's in that one instead of the planter box separating the cars from the bike. Make that a tree space.
Oh, okay, the one that only has the one.
So your tree wouldn't be on the sidewalk; it'd be between the bikers and the.
And then feedback that we're hearing from various municipalities that have put in cycling infrastructure that's right next to pedestrian infrastructure is that there needs to actually be another buffer between the two, because people with like vision, who are visually impaired will just wander into the bike lane because they don't feel some kind of
like the seawall.
A good example is just using different floor treatments. Like Barcelona is like a prime example where you have the same area has pedestrians and cyclists, and the only thing that changes is the color and texture of what you're on. And it sort of becomes your responsibility as a person walking or cycling.
Different societies.
Well, how you're,
Yeah. We're too litigious for that.
and yeah, North America, we just sue people.
I think a slight reduction in the width of the sidewalk would go a really long way if it meant you had trees on both sides.
Especially if there's that many more vehicles on that street.
Yeah, there's more vehicles, and also those trees are only every 8 meters, right? So really, you have 7 meters of extended potential sidewalk and then a tree, right? So I think it goes a really long way.
Okay. So are we feeling more support for H than G?
Yeah. Yeah.
Show H again?
So H has no parking.
Right.
So
No
that's
parking, no setbacks, right?
no parking, no setbacks.
One tree.
So an adapted H.1.
So that's losing the 24 parking stalls on that south side. That's losing all the parking in that area.
I think it's a good artery. It's a people mover, a car mover. It shouldn't be for parallel parking and slowing down. And I think it's going to be people going and trying to get into Cleveland, 2nd, 3rd, and loggers. So the more we slow it down with people parking and looky-loos for a stall, if that's just an artery to get to those lefts, I think it's a good thing to delineate. It's a lot of parking.
Well, even there's like, these both say, like there's figure 5 and figure 6, they're both option G, but they're
Different sections.
the different, but even the 21.5 meter one that allows for parking on the south side? Is that the south side or the north side?
It's the south side.
Okay. That would allow, so that would mean that the bike lanes are on the north side?
Yeah, it's all on the
Oh, okay. Yeah, that it would allow to have that extra flexibility should there need to be an increase in the capacity of the road later on, and then there's a moderate setback.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point too. Yeah. Say if there needs to be increase in like right turning lanes or something like that, then if we had space for the parking and kept that as buildings come in and as we grow in this area, then we're ensuring that we just have extra space to work with.
Well, I think that also that it would allow, there would be some parking along there, but it would allow changes in habits, because I would bet that a lot of that loggers back to the rail line, I bet there were a lot of those cars that are there and they don't move. Like, I bet there's a lot of them that are just sitting there. Spare cars, it would allow for people to change their habits too. Like, there could be multiple vehicles sitting there that don't need to be there and limiting it, and then there would allow for some adapting and also getting used to the fact that, okay, hey, there may not be parking on here at all at some point.
Some really nice corner lots on that stretch though. Is the one thing, like as a gateway, like I think about when we were looking at Cleveland and Pemberton, like super nice corner, and every corner is quite a prominent, probably almost some of the most downtown because they're big and they're angled and have a lot of frontage. So yeah, where Corsa is there, and then coming into 2nd and 3rd, I mean, we talk about plaza space, gathering space.
Pardon?
The ugly lot with the chain link fence around.
Yeah.
Welcome to Squamish.
Yeah.
So where's all the parking? You counted 24 along there?
Yeah.
24.
A lot of it is between 3rd
It's
and
a lot.
2nd.
A
It's
big
right
chunk of
there.
it's right here.
Yeah.
Oh, so maybe that is your idea where you go from vehicle dominated, and when you get to 3rd, maybe it changes. Maybe you keep those.
But mind you, like Service BC and those other offices which have limited parking would be across the
Should
board.
have on site.
It has on-site.
I think the big thing we're trying to consider as well, and Laura brought this up, is that the more space too we have, the more retrofitting we can do too. And we're really, when we looked at these designs, we're like, how do we functionally do this, and how do we put this in, and how do we make this a straight shot? So those are also considerations that have been, taken into.
The 1.5 meter setback I think isn't too much, and then if you allow encroachments into that, developers can.
Like the cantilevering at
Yeah,
the 3rd
then you
story.
have coverage for rain, and you have
Cool.
get your bay windows back and or your balconies into that or whatever.
So just conscious of time, and maybe trying to get out before 5. Do you guys have some final comments around the parking considerations that we have?
I think the unlimited buyout's a good one.
Yeah. They
For,
want
for
us to spend it.
commercial,
Yeah.
for everywhere, and the increase to the rumored 15,000 is a good one. It's gonna
On
be
what?
hard for people to buy those out, so they're either not gonna build it, and that ties back into the percentage of forced office commercial space is gonna be a tricky one. But yeah, I think it's gonna force developers to do one or the other.
And
They're
is
not
it-
gonna be able to
so
fit it.
Just to clarify, I think at this time, we're more looking at equalizing it. So right now we have 4 and we have all or nothing, like, so trying to find an equal thing. I don't know if we're proposing to do everything like Cleveland, but that's still a great comment to, and if that's the direction we should go in,
I think if
then
you
let us
want
know,
more
but-
commercial, you have to. It's too hard to crunch those numbers. I don't know how it's too comprehensive of a design problem to figure out what that allowable buyout would be to not
But
hamper.
if that raising it to an unlimited amount of buyout is tied to increasing the actual amount that it costs, then you're right, the developer then will have to make that
Yeah,
decision.
there'll be a good, I think money's a better constraint
So
than
it's 15,000 per stall.
person. It's 6 right now, is
But
that
then
right?
you're saying that they could do that to, like, if they were required to have 20 stalls, that they
yeah.
could
Mhm.
do that.
But
But then
that's a-
that money could go
You
towards.
can actually build a
But in-
stall for $15,000 somewhere else. Well,
Yeah,
it's
although with what we see for averages for parking garages and those cash and leaves, they're more like 30, 40, 60,000. Like, so that's the more the number, it would be
a big jump,
a
though.
bigger jump, yeah.
That's
And
That's
downtown
my opinion.
Vancouver, it's 40,000. if you
But
want
land
to
costs, taxes,
Yeah,
different.
so it can't,
You gotta have development happen to start getting those things, so it's slippery, so, I don't know, that's just my opinion, though.
It's a mix, yeah. I think this is only buying out commercial spaces, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, could that incentive work the other way too? Whereas if they are, for what they're required, say if a building, an infill building was required having 10 parking stalls, and if they wanted to add another 6 onto it that were publicly accessible stalls, could that be incentivized in that way?
Offset the commercials. We did that in Mud 1, kind of, the share of guest parking requirements. I think that's a great one. On the bigger lots, it's doable. Like on that Vantage project, we were giving them a hard time because they didn't want to add a few more stalls, but I mean, I think they could have fit some public stalls considering how big the commercial CRU was, so I think that's a great one.
but there's a
Instead of-
huge parking lot behind it.
I know, but that's going to get developed. Instead of buying out a commercial stall, provide one for an overlap of guest and public or something. Yeah. I think the whole map is a good one too, not just Cleveland. I think that's thinking more long term, so I would support that. I think that's a smart move.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we, so I don't think we need to summarize, I think everybody cares. But just quickly, so that we can be really transparent when we go to council, I think what I heard is that you guys all liked the Third Avenue option of the 2.5, but then considering the cantilevering or the encroaching of the upper stories to kind of balance that out. And then the Second Avenue option of the status quo, the 20 meters, what's there right now. Sounded like everybody was on board and liked that.
But to change some-
But
Maybe you
to
could fix that curve.
consider future retrofits of a bike lane in the future or in relation to the bump outs and stuff like that. And then for Pemberton, I think both G and H were on the table, really?
Is it
And then
modified H?
or modified.
Should be on.
Well, so it was a G with the parking, but then.
Well, I think we were talking about, the 21.5 meter version
Mhm.
That was
with the
G.
parking on the one side,
Yeah,
not on both sides.
yeah, that was
If
G.
you
That was
need
G.
to put
Yeah.
Okay.
G and G.
I think generally some good points on all of those, so I think we'll still present them, we'll make some changes that way, and we can still ultimately want to get council's direction on that too. So we could relay that there's support for both.
Yeah, I have a strong opinion. Like, I think you guys have refined it well from the first round when it was just so many ideas. So I don't know, I always think, especially with council too, like, just strong opinion, this is why, this is the public numbers, and then I think they'll be able to digest, because it is so complicated, right? You could do this for months. which
So
I'm
what's
sure
your
you have.
strong opinion then?
Well, I think we're close. I think the adjusted H for Cleveland and a more vehicle dominated, but still allowing pedestrians. And then I think the third up and second were fairly clear. Because otherwise you end up with trying to do everything and it's hard and you're not going to fit it.
What?
Or just like, I guess, putting straight trees as the buffer, as opposed to plant trees.
Yeah, I got that one.
And is it still being discussed about the desire or the viability of a parking garage, or is that really the direction that planning is like thinking of going in terms of a solution for long-term for the
Well,
town?
we have a parking strategy that says that we have to look into this, like the feasibility of it, and in I think 2018 we're actually supposed to. Yeah. So out of the parking strategy that we had that started in 2016, we had some outcomes in 2017 that we've been working on, and then we're supposed to actually look at like the full feasibility of enforcement and a parking garage and location and all of those pieces. So it does require, looking at, do we have a parking problem? How much parking do we need? Where are those like potential locations? So that is something in a report work that we'll need to be doing, and we are planning to do.
Is there, just as an option, I find that the challenge is really trying to get parking underground, just due to what is underneath you. And looking at like a big 4-story parking structure, it's not really nice. Is there a way to sort of offset or somehow help developers and people who want to build actually get underground parking? Like that's, I don't know how you would do that, but
Pumps 24/7.
yeah.
I know that, we don't have a lot of examples of it, and I know, with the Vantage project, they had a little bit of underground that they put in,
I
and
just
it's
don't buy that.
still tough.
False Creek is a swamp. Like we did 2 stories underground. It was a swamp and it was a raft slab and tank like a swimming pool.
Yeah.
They built it, so
I
it's
think
expensive,
Richmond-
yes, but
Yeah, I think
but-
Richmond is another
Richmond.
good example.
It's not
They have a
ideal.
super high water table and they're still undergrounding, but I think that it comes down to the cost of it.
Yeah, it's
And at
expensive.
some point, the land values will make it feasible to go underground, and right now, we're not there.
Right.
Yeah.
But you can go above ground. I mean, I'd love to see. You should have a district-funded design competition, ideas competition for parking and parks and infrastructure downtown. Get students, get professionals.
And
then
there's
have-
ways of making it look not like, typical.
Oh yeah, it's just
Yeah,
I mean,
there's examples out there of it.
Tons in
That's
Europe.
what we would be aiming for,
Yeah.
obviously. We wouldn't do the, just, the
Yeah,
old school.
yeah.
Or a new
parking
municipal
garage.
hall with parking and a parking.
Funky and creative.
But the difference between like the potential profit of like a 30-story building versus a 6-story building, there's that point where investing in underground
Well, that's it. I
infrastructure
think you
and
hit it.
pumps in and having all this maintenance cost
Yeah.
that then gets put onto the future,
Yeah.
condo owners and
Couldn't do it here.
yeah.
5 to 6, you can't. You got to go higher up at that point, or huge blocks.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you, you guys,
Good.
Yeah,
for
great work.
giving us some really amazing feedback as always, and we'll continue to keep you in the loop as we bring this to council and we refine these bylaws. We'll probably bring the proposed bylaws to you guys when they're in like a finalized state, potentially for your review. But yeah, thanks so much for today.
Yeah.
Great.
Richard, do you want to
Awesome.
close this?
Yeah, motion to adjourn? Second, adjourn. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Perfect.